Trevor and I went yesterday. It was incredible. We were in the one where the power went off. Sunday, the power went off in the middle of the movie. I think it's like the 11:45 show. Yeah, no.
I would like to welcome all of you and call our meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. It is May 7th, 2012, and I have the pleasure of introducing Kevin Ravenak, Spencer Sadler, Michael Harris, and Simon Scaletta. All the letters are scrunched there. They're accompanied by their leaders, Clayton Sadler and Mike Ravenak. Gentlemen, you may begin.
Color guard attention. Color guard forward march.
Would the audience please rise?
Color guard halt. Color guard please post the colors. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard dismissed.
The audience may please be seated, and let's give these gentlemen a nice hand. Not only would I like to acknowledge DIN 268, representing Greenbrier School, but also thank their leaders for working with these young men to grow up and learn all the skills of scouting. I think scouting, both girls and boys in the village of Arlington Heights, are extremely healthy. And they've both recently, and this year is the Girl Scouts' 100th birthday, and 2 years ago the Boy Scouts, and I think they look really marvelous for their age. They've done really well. I would now ask if the clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Blackwood?
Here.
Trustee Breyer?
Here.
Trustee Farwell?
Here.
Trustee Glasgow?
Here.
Trustee Hayes?
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Here.
Trustee Scaletta?
Here.
Trustee Sidor?
Here.
President Mulder?
Here. We have a quorum, so we'll move forward with approval of minutes. We have on item 4, for those of you who may have gotten here early enough to get a copy of our agenda, you could follow along with us. And also for anyone who wishes to address the village board this evening, whether it's an agenda item or a citizen to be heard, please fill out a form. And tonight, because we have a variety of subjects that we expect speakers, they're color-coded tonight. Is that correct? Do you want to tell us what the colors are for, Becky?
Pink would be Bossier Place, green for Kirchhoff, and blue for any other issue.
Hope all of you are taking notes. Approval of minutes, item 4. First, we have the minutes of our committee of the whole meeting held on April 9th, 2012. I'd ask if there are any trustees who wish to vote no or pass.
Pass.
We have a pass from Trustee Rosenberg. Any other comments? A motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Blackwood. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next, we have the Committee of the Whole minutes of April 16th, 2012. Again, comments, corrections, deletions, or additions.
Pass.
Move approval. Second.
Note the pass for Trustee Hayes,
Pass.
pass for Trustee Scaletta. We have a motion from, was it Trustee Glasgow, seconded by Trustee Farwell. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And finally, we have the minutes of the regular Board of Trustees meeting of April 16th, 2012. Again, comments, corrections, deletions, or additions?
Pass.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Glasgow, seconded by Trustee Rosenberg for approval. Note the pass for Trustee Hayes and Trustee Scaletta.
Pass.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We now come to the accounts payable, item 5 on our agenda, and I would call on Trustee Hayes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move approval of the payables dated April 30th, 2012 in the amount of $1,893,721.85.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Farwell. Any comments or questions from trustees? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Hayes?
Yes.
Trustee Farwell?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
Trustee Breyer?
Yes.
Trustee Glasgow?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
President Mulder?
Yes, motion carries. We now go to item 6, recognitions and presentations. It is May, and as we approach this month, we always know that at the end of this month, we have a Memorial Day, and Mr. Greg Padavani is somewhere here. Greg, if you could please come forward. Mr. Padavani has been tremendous. I've lost track of how many years, Greg, but of just organizing, being a participant with Trustee Hayes on reviving our Memorial Park, which is one of our oldest parks in the village. And thanks to the Park District and the members of that committee, it's been reorganized and much easier for people to enjoy the ceremony at the end of the parade. But it's been expanded, and that's due to Greg. So why don't you tell us all about it, Greg?
Thank you, Mayor Mulder. Thank you, trustees, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen everywhere. As Mayor Mulder said, I'm Greg Padavani. I serve as chairman of the Veterans Memorial Committee here in Arlington Heights, which is a group that's worked on the Veterans Memorial Park, but also the Memorial Day Parade and the ceremony after the parade. And we've just had such a tremendous outflowing of support and help from people all over our community that we felt we'd bring it all together and tell everybody about the 3 days, the events planned over the 3 days of Memorial Day weekend that are so wonderful, that are going to honor our veterans, especially those who have given all for these in the service of our nation. We have a PowerPoint here that has a few slides with some pictures that if they could bring that up. Can't see it. Well, in any case, what I wanted to tell you about first and foremost is that for the first time ever, the Metropolis Theater is going to have a Memorial Day benefit concert. It's going to feature a nationally renowned jazz singer by the name of Tammy McCann, who is just fabulous in her singing, and she's got a special repertoire of songs to honor veterans, and she's backed up by an 18-piece big band. Some of the guys I know play in that band, and they are fabulous. And that concert's going to be on Saturday, May the 26th, Saturday, May 26th at 3 p.m., and you can call the Metropolis Performing Arts Center box office to get tickets for that. Then on the Sunday following that, that's Sunday the 27th, the Salute Incorporated folks are going to have their annual Got Freedom Run, 5K, 10K, but they're also going to have, for the first time ever, they're going to have a tactical challenge at the end of the 5K run for those who are feeling pretty tough and want to take on a challenge after the race. Very much like an obstacle course in the military, although they said no shooting and no landmines. Then on Memorial Day, that's Monday, May 28th, we're going to have our parade. It's taking the same route as always, in which it lines up here in front of City Hall, marches down over to marches down over to Dunton, north to Euclid, and then Euclid over to Chestnut, and Chestnut down to park, Memorial Park. It steps off at 9:30 sharp, okay? And it will have in the parade what we had last year. We had some very good representation from our active duty military services. We'll have the Marine Corps, we'll have the United States Army 85th Army Band, and we'll also have the United States Navy Honor Guard from Great Lakes Naval Training Center, as well as quite a contingent of Army troops from the 85th Support Group here in Arlington Heights. We'll also have our veterans organizations, the American Legion, the VFW Post 981, and the Marine Corps League in the parade also. But there's a very special first that we're having here this time in Arlington Heights, and that is, for the first time ever, we're going to have the Vietnam veterans of America marching in our parade here in Arlington Heights. And we were able to convince them to not march in Chicago, but come here to Arlington Heights because of the experiences we've had as veterans marching in the parade here in Arlington Heights. And it's really hard to describe unless you're a veteran who marched down from the very beginning of the parade to the very end of the parade, 1.25 miles, and over that entire distance, the people on either side of the parade stand up, they clap, and they yell, "Thank you." And it's unending. You walk for a mile, or march for 1.25 miles, and you hear the people of Arlington Heights yelling and clapping, "Thank you." And I've marched with some very, very tough, grizzly veterans who've had tears in their eyes by the time they reach Memorial Park. I cannot overstate to the people of Arlington Heights how much that is appreciated by our veterans. And it's that aspect of Arlington Heights, of our community, what's in our heart, that's bringing the Vietnam veterans of America to this parade. And that's the basis for a very special invitation I want to make to everybody here in Arlington Heights. If you are a Vietnam veteran or you know a Vietnam veteran, ask them to come to the Arlington Heights Parade and fall in behind the Vietnam Veterans of America banner. It's going to be position 15, which they think is going to be somewhere right around the bend around Station 1 here on Sigwalt or Davis Street. Fall in there. All the Vietnam veterans that are anywhere within the sound of my voice. Fall in with them and experience a welcome home Arlington Heights style. That's really something that only somebody who marches in the parade can understand when they see the people of Arlington rise and clap and say thank you. So that's a very special invitation. It's going to go out in all sorts of forms tomorrow, but you're hearing it first. The Memorial Day Parade is also going to have a lot of our standard folks who are there, all the scouts, all the bands that we've had. It'll be a wonderful experience. And then at the park, the Memorial Day ceremony is going to have yet another first. Again, we'll be honoring our Arlington's fallen heroes there, but for the first time ever, the churches of Arlington Heights have come together to form the first ever Memorial Day choir, who are going to sing some very special songs for us. And at last count, we were up to 180 singers who are going to be there at the park, first to sing the service songs at the beginning of our ceremony, all 5, and then as we're reading the names of the fallen heroes and people are laying the wreaths at the eternal flame, they're going to sing the Navy hymn, Mansions of the Lord from the movie We Were Soldiers, which is actually the hymn of the Army now, and Amazing Grace. And all that is to commemorate and honor Arlington's fallen heroes. And those are the 58 young men from our town who have gone off to service and died in the service of our nation. And those 58 young men are commemorated on a banner. You'll find that banner down on the first floor of the Village Hall here. All 58 names from all the wars telling you who they were, where they served. That same banner is in the Arlington Heights Library. It's over at the Senior Center, and you can see that same list of names on the Memorial Park website, which you can get to at ahp.org and click on the website. But because of those fallen heroes, we're also working on the Fallen Hero Wreaths this year again, which is a single wreath for every one of the fallen heroes, 58 of them. Those wreaths will decorate not only the park on Memorial Day, but the Metropolis folks have also arranged to have those same wreaths decorate the stage at the Memorial Day concert. So we'll be able to see those names and commemorate the service and the sacrifice of those heroes, both on Saturday and on Monday of Memorial Day. And we are looking for sponsors of those wreaths to help us put those wreaths together. You can see them on our website. Finally, there's one final tribute after the ceremony that we're going to invite all veterans who are present at the ceremony, and that's the annual Remembering Our Veterans photo. We started this when we dedicated the Eternal Flame at Memorial Park, and we just got all the veterans who were there, and the Arlington Camera Club came up and said, let us take a picture. And it turned out to be one of the most wonderful pictures I've ever seen, and you can see those on your screens, I hope. It's a wonderful collection of just whoever served, and they don't have to be from Arlington. They can be from anywhere. And we're going to do the same again this year. After the memorial ceremony, I'm just going to ask all the veterans to gather there in front of the Eternal Flame for the picture, and the Arlington Camera Club is bringing big wide-angle lenses so that we can get even more people in. Finally, one last thing to thank, person to thank here, and that's Derek Hanley at Peggy Canane's. The Navy Honor Guard, the 25 young sailors who are coming here to march in our parade and to honor, be a part of our ceremony to honor the wreath layers. Those young men and women don't come down without lunch. The Navy said, if we're going to bring them down here, they have to be given lunch, and Derek Hanley at Peggy Canane's stepped up and said, I'll give them lunch. So they're going to go from Memorial Park over to Peggy's to have a great lunch from the courtesy of Derek. And anybody in Arlington Heights that would like to come and thank those Navy sailors for their service during these times, stop in at Peggy's and just say thank you to them. Those sailors, they'll appreciate it immensely. My last slide, if everybody can see it, is just a simple slide of where can you get information. The Memorial Park website at ahpd.org. Click on the icon on the lower left that says Memorial Park, and you'll see all the information I was showing you today. Thank you so much. Thank you to the community of Arlington Heights.
Do you have these up on some of our grocery store windows?
Oh, yes. Mayor Mulder is holding up the Memorial Day Tribute to Veterans flyer. We've been pasting those all over town. The businesses of our community have been wonderful in putting them up in their windows. And it basically gives a summary of everything I've been saying here, including the route of the parade, if people want to get a position on that route. And I also put a few of the flyers in the back of the room here tonight.
Well, I wish you would be a little more passionate about if you've never met Greg before, you certainly know that not only is he himself a veteran, but whatever he does with such great enthusiasm and is always so inclusive. So thank you for all your work, and all the members of the committee and our very own Trustee Hayes here, who served in the military and is a product of West Point, I guess, right? It's just, we have a lot of veterans, and I'm so pleased as someone who really saw many of our veterans from Vietnam come back with no ticker tape parade, no welcoming, and don't feel that they have been welcomed. So I'm very pleased that Arlington Heights has the opportunity to say thank you to them this year.
And we'll look forward to as many Vietnam veterans joining us as absolutely possible. They're all welcome. And I want to say thank you to the village. They've been wonderful for supporting the parade and the ceremony, to the Arlington Heights Park District, and to the churches of Arlington Heights for putting together this wonderful choir that we're going to have. And then the community, the people of Arlington Heights have been absolutely wonderful. And it's a thank you to them also.
Well, thank you. And since we have such an audience, which we don't always have, let's thank Greg Padavani.
Thank you. We'll see you all on Memorial Day.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Just for sake of time, we had a very brief meeting of the Committee of the Whole this evening with just one item. I would entertain a motion to move 9B, the Committee of the Whole, report of the Committee of the Whole held this evening, to this point in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Blackwood.
Sidor.
Or Trustee Sidor. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We had an interview for a new member of the Board of Health, and so I would call on Trustee Hayes for that motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move at this time, as I did earlier this evening, the appointment of Dr. Timothy Laurie to the Board of Health with a term ending April 30th, 2015.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Farwell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Would Dr. Laurie please come up to the microphone? Dr. Laurie, if you'd please raise your right hand. Say aye and clearly state your name.
I, Timothy Laurie,
Repeat the following phrases. Having been appointed
having been appointed
to the office of Board of Health
to the Office of Board of Health
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of this office
of this office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
I don't believe any of the 9 of us doubt that for a moment, and we want to congratulate you, and if you'd please come forward.
Thank you very much.
This is the mere little piece of paper that when you come back at 95 years old, you can show your great-grandchildren, because Becky will still be here and have it, right? You might be 95 too, right? So if you would take that and sign that, and as now you are an official extension of this village board, I'd like to present you with this logo pin. And thank you in advance for your medical advice and your support of our fantastic health department and our nurses. So congratulations. As Dr. Laurie signs his oath of office, I always like to remind our residents that we have approximately 180 residents who volunteer on a number of boards and commissions that do a lot of work prior to any item coming before this board. They do so with passion, giving up their time, and they bring their expertise to the village, and we as residents all benefit from that. So we want to thank Dr. Laurie in advance. So thank you very much. It was also suggested that we would bring forth the consent agenda. For those of you who are following, the consent agenda are all the items placed on page 5, 6, and 7. Do any trustees have any questions in regards to any of those items?
I would make a motion to move the consent agenda forward.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Farwell, to move the consent agenda forward. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. I'd first ask if there are any trustees who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item for discussion? None. Is there any citizen in the audience that wishes to remove an item that is on page 4, 5, 6, and 7?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Glasgow, seconded by Trustee Scaletta for approval of the items that are contained therein. Any other comments? Roll call.
Trustee Glasgow?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
Trustee Breyer?
Yes.
Trustee Farwell?
Yes.
Trustee Hayes?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
President Mulder?
Yes. Motion carries. We go back to our agenda, which brings us, we have no public hearings this evening, so we'd be to item 8, citizens to be heard. And I believe that is the color pink. So again, anyone who wishes to address the village board on an item not on the agenda, this is the place in which to do it. So if you change your mind in the middle of this, you can still have time until we conclude these pink slips to bring it up to the clerk. Laura Taylor, you'd please come forward. And on deck, I would like to remind everyone, There will be a clock that says 3 minutes, and when it's flashing, I ask you to finish your sentence. And following Laura will be Scott Burgess. Welcome, Laura.
Hi. My name is Laura Taylor, and I live at 2715 North Windsor Drive in Arlington Heights. I want to build a place in Arlington Heights. However, I need to have some changes made. I want to build a residential place in a commercial area. While the village code says that I can only build 16 units in this building, I need to have 30 of them in order to make it something worthwhile pursuing. Because of the lot size, I won't have enough parking spaces as the village requires. However, I'm sure that a lot of my tenants won't need it because they don't have cars. Well, when I have visitors, I'll just tell them to go and find parking wherever they can. I'm sure the other closed businesses around there won't mind. I guess if you're asking why I'm choosing this location with all the changes I'm asking, it's because while there are other places available that I wouldn't need these changes, they are much more expensive properties, so it becomes cost prohibitive for me to pursue building there. Funny, when I think about Bossier Place, like I read above, I don't see how any village would allow it being built. Much of what has been written about our trustees are spending money to fight this lawsuit. However, if the rules were followed, there really wouldn't be a lawsuit. But there is, because we are now being told we're not following the fair housing laws. Don't these laws also have to follow local ordinances also? I'm also quite sad that this topic is being brought up at this time. Since it's in litigation right now, none of our representatives really can talk about any of the going-ons of this lawsuit. I find it interesting that the type of housing that is being suggested is going to be smaller than comparable apartments in the area, but at the same rental amount. Only difference is that the tenants will be receiving housing assistance money to help offset the true cost of the rent. If this project does not work, the village then would be left with what would be a white elephant that would not be suitable for any other kind of development because of all the variances that were needed to develop this place in the first place. Reading about similar type of developments going up on Mount Prospect and Wheeling, I see that there is transportation available in that area and other amenities that won't be set over here at Bossier Place. Part of the leadership is doing what you're requesting of others to do yourself. The majority of people that have signed these forms and have been writing into the newspaper and are most likely here tonight do not even reside in this given area. So I ask these leaders, do you have any type of housing like this in your neighborhood with these kind of variances that you're asking Arlington Heights to make? Thank you. 22 seconds.
Thank you, Laura. Scott Burgess, name and address, and thank you for politely listening to all comments. And we prefer not to have any cheering or jeering. Welcome, Scott. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Scott Burgess. I'm the Executive Director of Alexian Brothers Center for Mental Health, which is at 3436 Kennecott Avenue in Arlington Heights. We've been in the community for 50 years. The mayor just gave us a wonderful proclamation not long ago for the work that we've done in this community for 50 years. Just speaking very briefly, I am a resident of Mount Prospect right next door, and I was blessed to be at the groundbreaking of a very similar project just this morning in Mount Prospect. I was very happy to be a resident in support of a project just like this in Mount Prospect that received unanimous approval of their village board and had no opposition from the community whatsoever. So for the speaker that just spoke, I'd just like to say that there are communities, there are neighbors within communities that support these projects wholeheartedly. And Mount Prospect, where friendliness is the way of life, is just right next door. After that, I would like to mention that we have been providing permanent supported housing for the mentally ill in Arlington Heights at my center for 25 years. I think the police department and others in the village would underscore the fact that we are very good neighbors. It's our intention to make sure that we're good neighbors. Whenever there is an issue that's presented, we are addressing that, and our compassionate staff that are active with our clients are doing so in order to help them recover from their illnesses. Illnesses that they've not asked for, illnesses that they can overcome with treatment. What I would also like to mention is that we are in support of permanent supported housing, which is the recognized best practice model for individuals with mental health conditions, and that's the project model that's being proposed here. As we have been in support of the program that's going to be launching in Wheeling, I feel very confident about that. I offered to them, just as I'm offering to you, to come by to visit the services that we provide, to see the clients that we provide them to, and to make your own judgment as far as whether this project and this model will be successful in Arlington Heights. I believe it will be successful here like it's successful in other places across the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to ask one more time if we could refrain from applause or jeering. Otherwise, we just will lengthen the meeting. I'm sure everyone is very passionate. We can just smile real big when we're supportive of the comments. Star Roberts is up, and on deck is Amy Burke.
My name is Star Roberts, and I'm a co-president of NAMI Northwest Suburban out of Arlington Heights. NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is a grassroots organization that helps families with advocacy, education, resources, and support. I joined NAMI in 1999 to get support for my son and myself. My son, Robert, developed bipolar disorder at the age of 18, out of the blue. He had no idea what was going on. Prior to that, he had been a very happy, healthy child, caring, kind, loving kid with a great sense of humor, just a regular guy on the basketball team 4 years in high school, having fun with his friends, wanting to play basketball in college, and he developed this illness right before he was to go to college, which is a very common age. Age is late teens, early 20s. There are many people who develop this illness at that age due to the stresses of college possibly, or life changes going from high school to the work world or school. My son would, had he lived, and he did die at the age of 24 due to his illness, would have wanted to live independently and live in a place like Bossier Place. He would have liked to have his own place. He expressed it to me. He said he's an adult. He didn't want to live with his parents. A lot of family members have their loved ones with mental illness living with them. And there are aging parents that are concerned with medical issues of their own, and what are they going to do if something should happen to them. So this type of housing, which is there's such a severe shortage of, we need so much of this in the north and northwest suburbs. We have very little. And my son, he was a very, like I say, bright kid as far as sense of humor and everything. There are a lot of people with mental illness who are very bright people. In our history, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill. One of the people I know in NAMI, her son, he has schizophrenia. He went to West Point. He graduated from there, went on to get a great job. She says how proud she was to see him in a business suit in his attaché case, etc. And he has schizophrenia. Now, we know that there is hope with the right treatment if you have the right medication and psychotherapy, that somebody can recover from mental illness and become stable and do well.
I need you to wrap up.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that these are the people that will be living in Bossier Place if it is built. We are calling on you to settle this lawsuit and meet with us individually by the end of May and to allow this much-needed project to be built. You have the power to do that, and the community needs you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Star. Amy, name and address again for the clerk, please.
Good evening. I'm Amy.
On deck is Jeffrey Phillips.
Good evening. I'm Amy Burke, and I live at 508 East Hawthorne in Arlington Heights. And I am hoping that we can be good neighbors and join Mount Prospect in being a leader in providing housing for the mentally ill, and this is something that is so needed in our community. This evening I'm reading a letter from Reverend Rex Piercy, the pastor of Congregational United Church of Christ, he was not able to be with us tonight, but he wanted to send these words. At last Monday night's Good Neighbors campaign rally, I was asked to make the arguments for the moral, ethical, and theological or faith-based case for Bossier Place Permanent Supportive Housing Project for those overcoming mental illness. The strategy team titled my talk, Why We Need This. I address you tonight because we do indeed need this in the village of Arlington Heights. The rights and the privileges a society bestows upon or withholds from those who comprise it indicate the relative esteem in which that society holds particular persons and groups of persons. In a sense, this is the golden rule in a community context. And while I doubt anyone would question the validity of the golden rule, I believe that in ways that are possibly even unconscious, societies sometimes roadblock the right of each and every person to be valued, recognized, and affirmed. Certainly many persons and groups can attest that they face challenges in having equal access to housing, education, employment, healthcare, and more. Among those who face discrimination and these challenges to equal access are those who are overcoming mental illness. I believe that this village must bend over backwards and go out of its way to do all that it can to affirm the full humanity and personhood of persons with mental or psychological disabilities or illness. I am deeply saddened that some of you appeared to give credence to ignorant and prejudicial and deeply flawed perceptions about persons with mental illness that were expressed in May 2010 in this very chamber. It is an injustice, not to mention mostly likely an illegality, for this community to construct or perpetuate barriers for persons with mental illness to be part of this village's life. I say it bluntly, NIMBY doesn't cut it. Hiding behind Cadillac zoning laws and too many variances doesn't cut it. As a person of faith, as a resident, and as a taxpayer and property owner in this village, I am compelled tonight by my faith in the still speaking God of justice and mercy to demand that my village government provide this equal access to housing for those with mental illness, even if, and perhaps in spite of, any cost it may require of us. I would be deeply saddened if the place I call my home and where my congregation has been at home for 53 years would overtly deny this act of inclusion to those with mental illness to the right to supportive housing for them among us.
Thank you,
So do
Amy.
your moral and ethical, and dare I say legal obligation. So please settle the suit, saving untold thousands of taxpayer dollars, and meet with us individually by the end of the month and allow Bossier to be built. Thank you very much. You have the power to do that.
Jeffrey Phillips, and on deck is Judith Royal.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Phillips, pastor of St. John United Church of Christ, 308 North Evergreen Avenue, Arlington Heights. I'm also part of the Good Neighbors campaign. We have borrowed, if not stolen, a little bit of the village motto, City of Good Neighbors, to remind us that this kind of project would make us all good neighbors, especially to those who need this kind of housing. This campaign has begun with just a few people and has now mushroomed to the more than 200 people who are here tonight in support of this project, and I have a number of petitions to share with you in a moment. But the point is that Arlington Heights wants Bossier Place. Arlington Heights wants to be a village of good neighbors. It's also been mentioned in the press and elsewhere that something I'd like to correct. It's been said that the lawsuit was filed prematurely in 2010, following the vote in May of 2010. It's my understanding that during the summer of 2010, well before the lawsuit was filed, that several efforts were made by the proposers, the developers, the Housing Task Force, reaching out to the village, asking for ways that the project could be modified to meet all the requests that the village was making. and that in no case was an opportunity given to meet and try to work out a project that would be acceptable to both sides. And so it was out of frustration and as a last resort that the lawsuit had to be filed. And so we're asking you to consider that as we ask you to settle the lawsuit, to end the terrible expense of now more than $180,000 of taxpayers' money to defend the suit. We believe it's in your power to speak to us about certain aspects of this project and even the lawsuit, and we believe it's within your power to settle the lawsuit. And so we ask you by the end of this month, which is only 3 weeks away, to meet with us individually, at least to hear us. If you don't think you can say anything to us, we think, though, that you can, and also to settle this lawsuit by the end of this month. We believe it is in your power to do so. I now would like to present to you nearly 2,000 signatures on these petitions here. I want to thank all those who are present who've been involved in the organizing of this effort and those who signed and wrote letters, and we'll continue to come at you. So come back at us and let's talk.
Thank you, Pastor. Yes, you certainly can. Mr. Siegel, did you want to make any comments?
Well, my only comment was...
Because what the pastor just said is not exactly what I recall. And so, I don't want to break any rules by making any comments, but sometimes things get taken out of context. I mean,
well,
you can remind us what we can or cannot say.
We're in the middle of litigation, as has been noted. And the basic policy of this village, and I think every other village, is you don't discuss pending litigation. The other side is represented by lawyers. I'm representing the village. If they want to discuss things, they can discuss it. But the village, in my judgment, the village board members ought not to be discussing. We should certainly listen tonight, and there's no reason to cut off comment. But I would ask, and this is not new for this case, this has been our policy as long as I've been here. We don't talk about pending litigation. Board is obviously going to listen to anybody who wants to speak, but there should not be any interchange or comment on the part of the village board members.
Thank you. Our last speaker, Judith Royal.
Judith Royal, 110 South Casper, Arlington Heights. Thank you for this opportunity. As a good neighbor, I would urge you to meet with us. And I don't wish to be disrespectful, but I too have consulted an attorney. And my favorite attorney tells me that you can listen to us, you can ask us questions, this can be discussed. You would not want to share the strategy of your attorney. So I think enough has been said for now. And we appreciated this opportunity as good neighbors to speak to you. And we hope you will reach out and talk to us. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Judith. And thank you for all that you do. That concludes the list of requests to speak and address the board. I would just like to thank and acknowledge the fact that I personally have received a number of letters that have been written, and that I did shortly after that meeting meet with some people to listen. And so I don't think that your sentiment is lost on us. So I appreciate you conveying your sentiment to support these individuals. So thank you. Was there any other citizen to be heard on another subject? Do we have any other cards? Then we'll resume our agenda. We've concluded citizens to be heard. We now move to page 2, item 9A, old business. We had a report of the committee of the meeting, committee of the whole on April 30th, wherein there was a motion in regards to Northwest Community Hospital's request to open exits to Kirchhoff Road. Mr. Dixon, did you have a comment to make at this point?
I did, Mayor, but I was going to wait until the motion was made.
Okay.
Reporting out, that is.
All right. There was a motion, and it has to be reported out to the regular Board of Trustees meeting, so I'd call on Trustee Hayes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would move at this time, as I did that evening, that the Village Board directs staff to implement Option 3 as set forth below, including the hospital's obligations and the long-term actions. First, hospital exit options under Item 1, Option 3, allow full access at the West Kirchhoff Drive only, subject to the following conditions. A, 9-month evaluation period. B, no exit at the East Kirchhoff driveway. C, hospital to provide baseline peak hour and average daily traffic counts prior to opening the exit from the streets north of Kirchhoff as determined by the village. D, hospital to provide traffic counts prior to the end of the 9-month period with and without area schools being in session. And E, the village board to reevaluate at the conclusion of the 9-month evaluation period whether to keep open the exit, close to the outbound traffic, or move forward with other more permanent options. And under internal hospital access / traffic circulation, Item 1, within the 9-month evaluation period, the hospital shall develop a detailed geometric plan to reconfigure the southeast ring road onto Central Road to improve exiting from the campus. 2, the hospital will work with the village and Cook County Department of Highways in efforts to obtain additional green time for exiting traffic onto Central Road. 3, the hospital shall review its internal signage package in an effort to continue to direct traffic as much as possible to exit Central Road. And 4, the hospital shall hire off-duty police officers to direct traffic at peak times. Under long-term corridor considerations, Item 1, the village shall submit another request to IDOT to reduce the speed limit on Kirchhoff from 35 to 30 miles per hour. 2, the village shall evaluate with IDOT the feasibility of pavement striping modifications at Dwyer and Kirchhoff within the existing pavement. And 3, the village and the hospital consultant will continue to evaluate other options along the corridor, such as potential traffic signal or pedestrian flashing beacon at Dwyer and Kirchhoff, as well as further evaluating traffic calming measures such as center landscape medians. And finally, under IDOT review and approval, any recommendations for modification along Kirchhoff Road are subject to submittal and review or approval from IDOT.
Is there a second?
Yeah, Mayor Mulder, before I second that, in light of some information that came over, that was provided to the trustees over the weekend, I'd like some further clarification on the subject before I second the motion. I don't know what the proper protocol is for that.
We need a motion and a second in order to talk about it.
I'm willing to second.
Okay, we have a motion by Trustee Hayes, seconded by Trustee Breyer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now we can discuss it. First, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor, board members. One of my daughters and her family live near Northwest Community Hospital. As a result, I will not be participating in this discussion. Diana McCullough will serve as acting manager in my absence. There's a very capable group of staff members assembled to assist the board as needed. Charles Perkins, our Director of Planning and Community Development, has coordinated the efforts of this group, which includes members of the manager's office, the engineering and police departments, as well as the planning department. Because this is the third time in the month that this subject has been before the board, there is not anticipated to be a staff presentation this evening, but the staff is certainly here at your disposal to answer any remaining questions that you may have.
Now, those of you who wish to make comment to the board, I've got green slips up here. If there's somebody that wishes to speak and has not yet submitted it, please bring it up to our clerk, and she'll get it up to me. Trustee Sidor?
Did we vote on that?
Yeah. Well, we're going to discuss
Motion,
it. We have the motion and a second. Now we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you.
Before voting.
Thank you, Mayor Mulder. It's been a long weekend for Trustee Sidor regarding this issue. I wanted to thank Kyle Murphy, Carl Grunschel, and Polly Schultz for inviting me onto their property, sitting in their living rooms, having coffee, and discussing this issue. These are 3 residents that I got to meet, and they were just very calm and very open. And I think it's something to be said about those types of residents that have open minds and are willing to listen to both sides of an issue. With that, just a quick soapbox comment regarding safety in our neighborhoods, all neighborhoods in Arlington Heights, not just necessarily the Pioneer Park neighborhood. I've said it before, we're our own worst enemy. I live on Mitchell Avenue for coming up on 24 years now. And the cars that go up my street, speeding, rolling through stop signs and things like that are just our neighbors. They're residents of Arlington Heights, I would imagine 90-some-odd% of them. So just as a public service announcement, no matter what neighborhood you're driving through, no matter what park or school or church you're going to and that you're traveling to, I ask you to just please slow down and be courteous and respectful of the neighborhoods that you're driving in. I think that would go a long way to help situations such as this. I have a question for Mr. Ponset. Tom, I talked to you today about this, but for the record, when we talk about monitoring the traffic and doing this 9-month evaluation period, can you just specify and clarify how we would go about evaluating if we did a temporary opening of the north exit of the hospital on Kirchhoff Road? How do we evaluate it specifically, and how do we decide at what point it's doable and not that big of an impact to the neighbors as they thought it might be, or it's a train wreck and it's just not going to work? Can you explain to the rest of the board and to the people out there how we would do that?
I believe the place to start would be the projections of traffic that were anticipated as the hospital was going through their 2 campus improvements, projected a volume of traffic out of their driveways that was more aggressive than they now feel is going to happen. Based upon what they feel the projections are going to be now, the rough volume of traffic moving out of the driveways is at or 10 to 20% higher than they originally, than was existing in 2001 before they started. Their original projection were almost double the traffic that they had in 2001. So the first place to start would sort of be to analyze what the total projected traffic from the campus would be and which projection is having merit. Based upon the volumes that they were projecting from the campus, they did a rough distribution on what they thought was going to happen out of driveways if they reopened. And if the driveways were going to be reopened, it would start to look at the driveway projections that they anticipated, which they based upon pre-closure of the driveways, how much percentage was going out of each driveway, projecting that into their new counts that they feel are more representative of the campus operations, what's happening in the medical industry. So it would be to start with what's happening at the driveways, what they feel will come out of the driveways. Once that distributes out of the campus, then track where it goes. The volumes that we were talking about and what to count as far as how many streets to count, I think originally they counted more than 30 intersection locations. Whether all that would be necessary to address just their contribution, or whether we'd be looking at all 30 to try to tap back into the south side question, the south side traffic question. That sort of seems 2 separate topics, and how you just get your hands around just the hospital information, I think would just gear more towards the streets that are immediately adjacent and not necessarily spanning out in a large way. That would be a good starting point if you wanted to expand it, if you felt, to count it all and work inward. I think we're going to cover too many other topics as opposed to starting inward, looking at immediate influence and then working out from there.
So if I understand the process correctly, then, if we did open up the north exit on a trial basis, you would gather all this information over 9 months and then present it to the board again at some point, and the board would then make some definitive decision on the opening of, or the reclosing of that exit. Is that correct?
Rough generations of traffic, increases, decreases in volumes on streets that we'd sort of suggest and the board would agree to, that we were covering what it was you were looking to analyze, accident review, and bring that all back and present what the fluctuations were.
Okay. With that said, I do believe that that west exit of the hospital would make the hospital campus a more user-friendly campus. Not necessarily out of a convenience sake, but I think it would be more user-friendly. I do have a question, though, yet one more question. And I don't know if, I'll just throw it out there. As a hypothetical, if we opened up that exit and 9 months later, the information that came to the board deemed it suitable to remain open, do we have the right or the authority to make that contingent upon the permanent closing, or to keep the Ridge Avenue exit permanently closed?
I believe the original motion, and I'm going to defer to the lawyers, is that the original motion that you made was for a 6-month time period, and that's been extended. So I don't know quite how to respond to that in terms of what the original closure of those driveways was intended to do and whether that's been extended. I don't know. I don't think I should answer that.
Let me just explain my train of thought, Robin. It's because I'm just trying to find a semi-permanent or permanent solution to this Kirchhoff Road exit thing. And trying to find some middle ground has been fairly difficult on this matter. As you know, it's been going on for many years. There's no win-win here. It's going to be some type of compromise. And I would, if it went forward, and we did end up opening that west exit, I would make it. I would like to see it, or think about making it contingent upon keeping that Ridge Avenue exit permanently the way it is. Robin, it's all yours.
Okay. Some of this is going to be a little bit redundant on what Tom said,
Okay.
but essentially the way this process is envisioned to work is, let's say if this motion is approved, there's a 9-month study period. At the end of the study period, staff would report back to the village board, at which point we would anticipate that the village board would make a true final decision as to what stays open, what gets closed. So at that point in time, a decision could be made that the west exit stays open permanently, the Ridge Avenue exit stays exit only permanently, that as part of that final, what I think everybody anticipates to be a final decision on this matter, that would be made once all the information was gathered.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Trustee Farwell.
Before we get started into this, can staff go through with us the motion and give us a timeline? So in other words, we're talking about 9 months. When is that going to begin? And what, if anything, has to happen beforehand, concurrently, subsequently? What is our timeline so that we all get it?
Charles is going
Trustee Farwell, just very briefly to answer your question, and it's a very good question. First step would be to have baseline traffic counts taken at the various intersections to the north, so we have a base of what's happening in 2012, actual counts at those streets, Salem, Fernandez, and others. At the same time, we would need to submit this request to the State of Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT, for their review to let us know whether they have a permitting requirement on this or not. So those two could happen simultaneously. Once the baseline counts have been taken, and once we've received feedback from IDOT, then we would be in a position to send a letter to the hospital indicating that those two provisions had been met, and they could then open the exit for the 9-month time period. That could be in the July-August range, depends how long it takes to do those base counts, it depends how long it takes IDOT to review our request. So then that 9-month would occur, and there'd be counts taken, there'd be observations through the police department and others, and that brings us to around March, April of next year. We would then take that data, have to analyze that and present that to a future village board meeting, probably in May of next year. By the time we analyze that data and have it presented in a reasonable fashion for the board to consider. In the meantime, there are a few other items, such as dealing with the county, trying to see if we can get additional green time. Some of the other options along Kirchhoff Road that we talked about at the Committee of the Whole meeting, those would be ongoing as well. And then lastly, not to muddy the waters, but today the engineering department did take a look at that southwest leg onto Central again, the one item that the board eliminated where staff had suggested widening that to provide additional turn movements. There may be the possibility that that turn lane could be extended within the existing pavement through additional striping. And I had a brief conversation with the hospital about that this evening. It still needs to be fleshed out with accurate measurements. But if that could be accomplished, it could have a good, significant impact in improving exiting onto Central, with allowing that southbound west turn movement to happen a little easier. If there are questions on that, Tom or Jim can give a little more specificity.
What about item internal hospital access traffic circulation number 4? The hospital shall hire off-duty police officers to direct traffic at peak times, and that is in the motion that was made last week. And how are we reconciling that with the information that our boards had suggested we look into, and the results that we got this past week with Cook County?
I'm going to ask Diana McCullough to start on talking about that, and then Tom Ponsack can talk about the response that he got from Cook County relative to Central Road.
Sure. When staff prepared the recommendation, we discussed having the off-duty police officers at Kirchhoff, not at the Central Signal. So that is what we would anticipate, that the hospital would hire off-duty patrol officers at the west exit.
At Kirchhoff, okay.
Correct, yes.
Have you ever thought of putting them at Central as well? I mean,
During our analysis, no, because it's a signalized intersection, which you normally don't have patrol officers. And actually, late last week, Tom Ponsa did have a conversation with Cook County, and Cook County indicated that that is not something that they would endorse. And Tom, did you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, the specific discussion related to on a temporary basis, those things are done, or on a more permanent base, well, semi-permanent basis for large venues that would have sporting events or holiday celebrations where you've got to move massive volumes of traffic back onto the street system, and it's just not safe to let it filter out on its own. The county's position was that since a signal, which is a traffic control device, is governing the driveway and Central Road intersection, that to establish another traffic control device, that being a police officer, on a repetitive, continuing basis, on a daily basis, would breed confusion on the part of the motorist from their point of view that there's two traffic control devices operating. And specifically, if that police officer was just for a certain time period in the day, okay, it's there and then it's gone. So they felt that they would not favor that or endorse that in any way.
how long would we be able to utilize a traffic safety officer at Central, at the southwest exit, before it becomes a problem with the county? And don't we have the ability to override that light to make it flashing red? If not, why? The reason why I'm going along this lines of questioning is because we're looking at what the real issue is. The real issue that the hospital is suffering is congestion during their shift times, most importantly the afternoon and evening shifts. And I'm trying to look at the most logical way to help resolve those issues first, to see if these logical ways, cheap ways, would alleviate a majority of their concern before we start getting into studies and permitting and everything else that's in the motion?
I believe the way that I could answer that is if there was an emergency situation or a safety issue or some malfunction in the operation of that intersection that necessitated a police officer to provide an extra level of efficiency or safety, then I believe you'd be warranted to do that. If it's just for a convenience factor, that's where I think the county would have a hardship trying to govern that. If it got into a scenario wherein there was a deficiency or there was a capacity limitation, I believe what they would probably force you to do is probably put in dual right turn lanes or dual left turn lanes, somehow improve the capability of the intersection to function with a traffic signal governance or an electronic governance that managed your discharge if it's only a single lane right and a single lane left, and that can't govern your shift change release, then they would probably make you improve that to a better level of service.
During this 9-month period, is that part of our investigation as well?
Well, in the other questioning that I gave them that the board wanted me to ask about was the extension of giving more green time, and the response that I was given was that in looking at their readouts at the county building, that they have telephones and the controllers that they can look at in the office. They were not seeing the maximum green time extension exceeded. So from their point of view, they don't view this as a substandard operating intersection. They did not make a visual connection to it. And he said, we're going to look at this for another few days. We will send somebody out there to watch its performance. And that's when I talked to him about, as traffic releases, sometimes it gets spread out and they don't quite get to the signal to extend it for more green time. So we did go through that, how you discharge a platoon or a column of traffic out of the driveway and whether it's staying tight enough to get up to that maximum time, which he said was 30 or 35 seconds.
Okay. So I kind of apologize. Is that going to be part of that study then or not?
They will look at it. From at this point, they don't visualize that they need to study anything because they're not seeing a deficiency, if I'm answering your question, from their point of view.
All right, so it's not going to. They would be IDOT.
A county in that one.
That's
the Southwest
the
Driveway
county.
and Central.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yes.
The county. All right. So you're saying that the county will not be evaluating it, and we are not anticipating doing the same?
They will look at it to just make a visual connection to substantiate what they're seeing in their office and whether they're missing something or they just are not picking up on the fact. Now, the problem for them to give more green time, if that platoon of traffic and the traffic getting up to the signal is just spread out too much, that they can't keep it, you've got to keep them compact enough so they can keep on moving. So if you did give them 45 seconds, the traffic could use it and not sort of miss the call to extend the green time. What happens is there's magnetic loops in the pavement. A car's got to get, if one car goes over it, the next car's got to get to it within 3 seconds or you lose the green. So unless that car, if it's too spread out, he's not going to get to that loop in the 3 seconds and then it cuts out and goes back to the main line.
Okay. Given the number of people here, I'm going to yield for. I've got more questions and things to say, but let's get more people's discussions. Thank you.
Trustee Glasgow.
Diana, my question to you is: I've heard from the hospital, I've heard from staff, conspicuously absent during all these discussions is I have not heard anything from police, and I have not heard anything from fire. I have not heard anything from police with regard to a traffic safety issue over there, and I haven't heard anything from the fire department as there being any issue from Chief Erickson or anybody else in the fire department saying that there's problems with access from this department, Palatine, Buffalo Grove, or anybody else. Do you have any information from either our department or from any other department indicating that there's a problem here?
You are correct that our fire chief did indicate that he does not observe that there are problems with that exit.
Okay. Well, it seemed to be the crux of the hospital's desire that there were public safety issues, and as opposed to the issue of convenience, which I think many of the board members were concerned about here. that troubles me greatly. I mean, I realize nobody likes change, but when we closed those 11 years ago, it altered the character of the locality, and I have some real concerns. I was talking with Mayor Mulder's predecessor today, Judge Mackey, and he told me today that, in his words of wisdom, that you can give things to people, but you have a real difficult time taking them away. We had, and the hospital, have given these people a more quiet area. And not only the people in this community, but the people in Windsor, which south serves Pioneer Park and Scarsdale. And from Pioneer Park, the people in Scarsdale and the kids from Pioneer. The only problem that I see here, respectfully, is the shift change. And I am deeply troubled at the fact that we don't have any public safety people here from any department or village telling us that there's a problem. That is a real big issue for me. Weighing that in the balance to the public safety of the kids north of there, through the schools, and 3 different neighborhoods, not just Pioneer Park, as well as Wayside, which encompasses almost all of Arlington Heights and other areas, and Pioneer Park. We're going into the summer months, the issues between Scarsdale and Pioneer Park with kids going through that neighborhood. I realize it may be an incremental traffic flow, but we're making a decision to change something where we haven't taken steps to make incremental change, and at least I haven't heard any incremental change. Further, I made this very clear on the last date that I am concerned about that being used as a south side cut through. I sat after the last meeting in the Wellness Center parking lot and watched people, person after person, blow those stop signs coming through there, and I don't know whether or not we have the authority to even write tickets over there. As far as I know, that's private property. We don't police it. Is that correct?
That's correct, Trustee
Right.
Glasgow.
So now you've got people that are using it as a thoroughfare that are going not only right past the Wellness Center where people use, but right past an emergency room, and I'm uncomfortable with that. If I didn't vote against this at this point without seeing any incremental change, I'd be voting against my conscience, and I just simply can't do that. There's too many other issues here that, in conjunction with the county saying it's not a substandard operating intersection, the only thing that I'm basing this decision on is the hospital's representations, and I'm just not comfortable doing that. I appreciate it, Mayor.
Other comments before we go to the Trustee Breyer?
Tom, Onset that is, we were provided crash data that runs roughly 1999 through this particular year. And I sort of looked at this, and my interpretation was that when we closed off the hospital exits, that the accidents just moved themselves to other intersections. Is that the right interpretation, or should I glean something else from these statistics?
There were shifts, correct.
So that for all the thinking that this somehow made exiting onto Kirchhoff safer, these statistics suggest that all we did was move the accidents.
Statistically, I don't know if I could, make that reach, but I mean, there was numerical differences of increases and decreases, yes.
Decreases where it was closed, increases where it was open. I was on the committee, and the committee never really came to firm conclusions because everybody had their differences. But it was my impression that the people who used these streets were not necessarily hospital personnel, but many of those going through the neighborhoods were local residents. Now, am I remembering the report right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
My recollection of the report that came out of the committee studying traffic in this area was that the people cutting through the neighborhoods, cutting through the triangles, finding these shortcuts were really village residents more than people visiting or associated with the hospital. Is that the correct recollection?
Yes, from the HLR report.
I also remember from that committee that many of the cars transporting people visiting the hospital or working there that had, other than this village vehicle sticker, generally did not go through the neighborhood but went up and down Central. Is that the correct recollection?
Well, village staff engineering did a license plate survey to try to pin down of the people that moved through specifically Walnut, not the rest of the triangle streets. How many were local village residents and how many were from other cities? And as I recall, there was like, well, there was on the order of 143 out of 600 and some that were from other communities, of which there was like 35 other communities represented. There was a baseline of information. I've got it here if you want me to go through it, but.
Well, if you could bring it to a quick conclusion, I mean, is there a lesson that would be drawn from that, or a conclusion that would be drawn from that?
Well, I think the original substance of the concern was whether or not people from Mount Prospect, Wheeling, Palatine were using our local streets to sort of traverse through the triangle area to get over to Woodfield. That was kind of what we were trying to uncover. You know, how many, what I'll say, how much cut-through traffic was trying to maneuver its way through. So, again, of the traffic that we looked at, again, on a 12-hour period, there was a total of 623 cars in a 12-hour period just on Walnut. Of that 623, 146 were non-residents, and the highest number of non-residents, there was 11 sightings of people from Chicago, 9 from Elk Grove, 9 from Itasca, and then there's probably more like 60 communities represented of distributions of traffic moving through. So that was what we talked about last March, I believe.
So was the conclusion that the bulk are Arlington Heights residents, or they are not?
The bulk, yeah, like so 60-some% were Arlington Heights residents.
Now, all of the public pays for these streets. Is the attitude of the department that you work in and the professionals that you're involved with that residents who live in adjoining neighborhoods should be able to drive through any neighborhood, or is it better traffic practice to divert them from doing so?
Well, the goal of the policy that the village has been on for the last 20 years in terms of all the major improvements that were kind of significant, Arlington Heights Road, Central used to be a 2-lane. If you can improve the arterials, our goal is to keep traffic on arterials. If you can improve them to a high enough standard, people will take those routes. If you can get the signals to perform well, they'll stay on the major arterials by and large, unless there's some other generator in the area normally that would attract them onto the local street system. So the goal, obviously, is to sort of work from your hierarchy down and improve the major arterials first.
If we decided that keeping that west entrance on Kirchhoff is a good idea, how could we steer non-Pioneer Park traffic to decide that maybe Wilkie is a good road to take and they should go west to Wilkie or East Arlington Heights Road? What means would exist for us to do that?
For local residents south of Central?
Well, for anybody. if they were coming out that driveway in the west end there, onto Kirchhoff, what could we do to encourage them, if they did go out that way, to either go west to Wilkie or south to Arlington, or east to Arlington Heights Road?
Well, the conundrum on the sort of a midpoint collector street somewhere between Arlington Heights Road and Wilkie has always been that the hospital property is not, it's been traversed, but to answer your question specifically, the hospital, quite honestly, could post their property, private property, no through traffic, and enforce it. I mean, it's their private property. So, I mean, if you're creating a link to go through there, it's not a village domain, it's not a village public right-of-way, and sign it as such with, you know, fines or, for parking, obviously, that's easier to maneuver, but for through traffic, they're maneuvering through private property.
Yeah, but wouldn't that only force people to go through the triangle?
Well, you were talking about trying to get to Pioneer Park. Kennecott and Dwyer might be a closer route if you had to go Walnut. Well, it's maybe, you know, either way, but going all the way out of Wilkie, I don't think people would go to Wilkie to go to Pioneer Park. That might be a real roundabout way of extra travel.
And my last question, which everybody thankfully awaits and says, good. If you had outpatient surgery, and seems to be how everything is pushed, you have to practically be dead to be in a hospital. And you were, I'm staying nonpartisan on this one. And you were
You're
to
still the
leave
best straight man in
after
the business.
Laughing because it's true. No, insurance won't cover it.
You were leaving after outpatient surgery, and you live to the north. And you generally feel like hell after outpatient surgery. That's pretty mild for a trucker to describe it.
Shouldn't even be driving.
You were well, obviously somebody's driving you, Bert. Come on. And you're leaving. Your relative is driving you, of course, or your son or daughter, and you feel miserable. And you have a choice of waiting for, and you live north, and you have a choice of waiting for a long green light, or you could exit out the other way and get home a few minutes earlier and avoid complications that might occur that I won't take the time to describe here since we're probably on television. And you avoid problems. Should we be denying people the right and privilege of getting to comfort after a surgical procedure and making them wait because we don't want that exit open or permit them to have the most direct route to get to their northern residence? And maybe there is no answer to that. Maybe you don't want to answer it.
I never get sick.
Well, there are a lot of people that say that they don't get sick. They just go on the Glickerts instead. But and I don't wish that on anybody.
That's really sick.
But in any case,
I feel like I'm
that's
at a
the
late-night
question
show
to
or
think
something.
about. And I know we've been in that situation, and I know the extra time waiting at a light makes a difference sometimes. So I'll leave it at that. I see it as something, unless I'm convinced differently this evening, my vote would stand as it is. I just see that as too big of, if the police would come forward and say this isn't a good idea, I would accept that. Which reminds me, there was one other thing. Charles, do you have pictures of queuing at the traffic light that might be worth us taking a second look at?
Trustee Breyer, I did receive that request, and we uploaded some of the photographs that the hospital provided, and these were from their presentation to the Committee of the Whole on April 9th. So we have 3 photographs here. One is looking southbound on the west driveway towards Central Road. This is the employee parking garage that's in front of you on the left-hand side. This is just a closer-up shot of that intersection. And then looking in the other direction to the other garage with vehicles waiting to cross that stop-controlled intersection.
Do you have a professional comment regarding what is being portrayed?
Well, if you look at this particular one here, this is why staff had recommended the one option to widen the driveway at Central, because the left turn movement onto Central, because that turn lane is fairly short, as soon as 8 or 9 cars are stopped there, it precludes the southbound right turn movement, so everything backs up. And that's probably contributing to the issue that Tom talked about, and that these vehicles can't get through this stop signal and trigger the mechanism to use all the green time. As I mentioned right at the beginning, engineering took another look at this, and there might be a way to restripe that area to increase the turn lanes, so you can get more vehicles off to the left and allow that southbound right turn movement, and that would help free up some of this. Probably not all of it, but that's what's causing the problem with the green time not being used.
I'd happily hear what others have to say, as well as the audience.
Trustee Farwell.
I had a question for staff. Staff voluntarily gave us some traffic counts for crash data from 2006 to present last week. What was that supposed to show us? Anybody? I'm not exactly sure who requested it and how it ended up on our
That
desks.
was in response to a request from a trustee asking for it.
Okay.
So what was updated was going back.
The one
to
that I had asked for.
1999, which is what was up a short while ago.
Right. Okay, the one that you gave us last week from 2006 to, I'm just saying 2011 because 12 isn't a full year, shows basically an average crash per year on Kirchhoff from 2006 to 2011 being 19.75. When I had asked, in order to get the full picture of what we're dealing with and what we're being asked to do, I'd asked for crash data back from 95 forward, but unfortunately we don't have figures from really 2000 before, from 1999 and back. We don't have any back figures. So we have to look at 2000, 2001, and 2002. The average crash, number of crashes per year on Kirchhoff in the area that we're talking about prior to the closure of the northbound was 39. After closure, 19.75. We didn't move numbers, we brought them down. It's that simple. So I do have issues with the idea that we simply moved things around. We didn't. We brought it down. We softened an area. With that, well, I'll just leave it at that for now. There'll be more later on this issue, but to me, this is a real issue of safety. Let me just mention one more thing, and then we'll move on. It was indicated the last two meetings that the board kind of got this feeling that 2001, when we closed Kirchhoff, that somehow we created this, or we were contributing to the congestion problem that is being suffered by the employees at Northwest Community Hospital. It's simply not the case. I had asked for and received from staff last week the 1995 presentation by the staff, by Northwest Community Hospital. And on the 16th, 17th, 18th pages of that 83-page document, it said here, this was out of Chapter 2, background information of the Gewalt-Hamilton study. It said, number 2, over 700 more vehicles travel through the key central Kirchhoff intersection during the background traffic evening hour peak than the hospital's afternoon peak hours. Then you go on to 5, it says about 20% of the Northwest Community Hospital traffic uses ridge access during the morning. I'm not too worried about that. Over 40% of the campus traffic uses this drive during the roadway evening peak hours, can be attributed to, so what this is saying is why were people using Ridge, which we're not talking about Ridge, but this is the reasons why they were going there. Number 2, the lack of available exit storage at the signalized Fernandez and Central intersection. Can we go back to those congestion sites? those pictures that you guys downloaded for us? And where are those cars going? Central and Fernandez. So back in 1995, it was highlighted in the traffic study, not just 2001, it wasn't highlighted in 2006, and this is nothing new here in 2012. 1995, it showed up on a 1994 study, and the lack of available gaps through traffic on Central at unsignaled west axis, which we know about. So
Trustee
this,
Farwell, this image is the west entrance.
It's not the Fernandez.
Fernandez is east.
Yeah.
It is onto Central, but the
this
west
is
entrance.
Fernandez. Okay,
No,
I
no,
apologize.
no,
You're right.
is
So
the-
this is all right. So
West exit.
So on this 94 study, it's saying that because of a lack of available storage at the Fernandez and Central. Okay, so it was that same issue that we have is lack of stacking still.
Mhm.
Okay, so it still seems as though back in 95 they had issues on getting southbound or getting out of the south part of their campuses. Is what I was pulling from this. Maybe not. I mean, this isn't directly saying you're right, south and. It's not the southwest area, it's the southeast, but it's still indicating that it was hard to get out on one of the south exits. So this is not a new problem, it seems to be an old problem that although we as a village and would like to partner to try to help them alleviate, I don't think I would do it at the expense of doubling the traffic accidents on Kirchhoff Road. So I'll leave it for now, I've got more, but let's see what everybody else has to say.
Any other comments before we go to the audience? We have several green cards. Okay. For those of you who were with us, you know that we used the 3-minute rule. I'll give the on-deck call, so if the person who is next will be somewhat close to the podium. And try to avoid redundancy. If someone's already made the comment, hopefully we'll all remember it. So we'll start with Wayne, and I think Wayne must be an architect. I've never seen such perfect writing. Engineer, okay. And on deck will be Tom Johnson. Welcome, Wayne. Name and address.
My name is Wayne Zahorsky. I live at 908 West Kirchhoff Road in Arlington Heights. And one of the things I'm going to bring up, Norm, will be to direct some questions that you had. First, I want to be put on record that I would like to see both entrances, the east and west entrance, stay as they are. There's an old saying that if it's not broke, don't fix it. And they work extremely well bringing traffic into the campus. But at the last board meeting, there were 6 board members who voted to open them up. And it looks like the board is going to do that. So if we do open them up, I'd like to do it in a more permanent fashion. I think we've talked about this for 11 years. We've bantered back and forth. We don't need to go another 11 years or another year. We could come up with a conclusion and solve the problem. Nobody's going to be happy with this. We all have to give. But I think we've reached a point where if we're going to open up the exits, we have to do it permanently and we have to do it safely. What I'm proposing, and I talked to Mr. Perkins today, the engineering department, and can you put that slide up for me, please? Our illustrious engineering department came up with something at the last meeting that was phenomenal. What I want to do is to modify it a little bit, and that's option number 6. And adding an outbound lane in the center of the hospital on the east side of the church, but adding that lane as an outbound only, leaving the west and east entrances to the hospital alone, because again, they do work as it is. If you have a center outbound lane, you can direct traffic both east and west. And Mr. Perkins and I were discussing the pie, or we call it pork chop. I would prefer it to be on the hospital side and not to block off Fernandez. Now, there's some advantages to doing this. First of all, we know that there's a stack-up problem. This eliminates the stack-up problem. We know it gives complete access to both parking garages. We also know that the emergency or daycare surgery is right there and allows you to go out, as I've wanted to do many times since I've been there a lot. So there's a lot of pluses to it. We can put a light there if we need to in the future. The emergency trucks could go out that way. They are not then going against traffic coming in on the west ends. So we're giving the hospital an exit onto Kirchhoff Road, but we're giving it to them safely. It eliminates the stack-up problem, but with the signage changes or the continuous signage directing traffic to Central Road, it is a little bit farther out for people to go around. But there is a left or right northbound out of the parking garage on the west side. You can now access from the east side parking garage. You have a full campus access to go out if you want to. But being that you're going east and west in the center area is much safer than going in a very congested west entrance. The other thing is the traffic that we were seeing on Kennecott had a lot to do with the fact that you were going out the west entrance at a slow speed and allowed to turn very quickly onto Kennecott, which drove a lot more traffic onto Kennecott. If you exit at the center of the hospital property, you're going to be doing between 30 and 35 miles an hour by the time you hit Kennecott. The chances are more likely that these people are going to continue on down to Wilkie Road than try to make a sharp turn onto Kennecott. Unfortunately, any time that you open up one of these exits, no matter if it's west, east, or in the central, you're going to put more traffic on Ridge. But again, we've always said that Ridge is a collector street. But if we put it on there safely and let traffic come out in a safe manner, not in a haphazard manner as they were doing previously on the west entrance, you've solved a big problem. And it's a compromise, that's right. We've got to compromise and let the traffic open up, but it will come out safely, and that's the main thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Tom, and on deck is Polly Schultz.
Hi, I'm Tom Johnson. I work at the hospital. I'm the director of plant operations. I live at 914 Manley, St. Charles. I know I'm not a resident, but I thought I'm the guy you're worried about. I'm the guy who works at the hospital and then leaves, and you're concerned about all that traffic going north through your neighborhoods. And I have to tell you, as a commuter, I've worked at Alexian Brothers in Oak Grove, I've worked at Christ Hospital in Oak Lawn, and now I work at Northwest Community, and I've been there for 3.5 years. As a commuter, I'm looking for major streets. I'm not going through neighborhoods. That's a slower way to go home. I go from macro to micro. I go through neighborhood streets when I get to my neighborhood. And I'm concerned about traffic as much as residents here are. And I understand that. You look at that stacking up on heading out to Central, and if you think that's going to go through your neighborhoods, I'd be concerned as well. But that's not where commuters go. And the patients and families and visitors that come there, they're looking to go out the same way they came in. I had a family member at the 901 building, and you can enter there. You have to go back out the other way. And I was there many evenings with the other parents that were there, and it was kind of embarrassing to tell them that they had to continue going out that way. It was very inconvenient for them, very confusing. And if there's a time when you're stressed and not thinking clearly about wayfinding, it's when you're in the hospital. We see that with the elderly patients that come into our hospital. So really, it's the wayfinding. We want to go out the opposite way. The last point I want to make is, to some degree, there's already been exiting out onto Kirchhoff. During the construction of the South Pavilion, there were construction workers using the church parking lot. And if you see on the map, there's actually a connector between the church parking lot and the hospital's parking lot there. And we actually had staff that were going out that way. We didn't find out about it until the construction workers were gone, and the church let us know that there were people cutting through there. So we put up barriers back in November, and that's when you really started to see the stacking happen, heading out to Central. So there has been exiting out there, and I think you've seen from the traffic studies that most of the people that go through the neighborhood are folks that live there. Us commuters, we're going to go someplace else. We're going to look for Kirchhoff to get to 90. We're going to take Central to get to New Wilkie, down to Gulf. That's the direction we want to go. So I appreciate that you're taking the time and you're thinking about this very carefully. I think compromise is a great thing, but we're not going through the neighborhood, and I think that's what you're concerned about, and I understand that, but that's not where I want to go as a commuter. Thank you.
Thank you. Polly, and then on deck is Nancy Link.
My name is Polly Schultz. I live at 805 South Ridge Avenue, and I'd first like to say that I've lived in Arlington Heights for over 30 years. And like many residents, I chose to come back home and raise my family because the quality of life I experienced was constant and never questioned. I've resided in several areas of this town, north, east, and now by the hospital. And this is the first time I've ever felt that this quality of life comfort may be compromised by the opening of the Kirchhoff exit, 1 or 2, whichever happens. In the past 10 years, the landscape of our community, neighborhood, and our lifestyles have changed with the growth of the hospital and campus facilities, the increased recreational patronage of Sunset Meadows and Pioneer Park, the increased enrollment in public and private schools, the increase of young families in our neighborhoods, and the explosive growth of technical devices used by pedestrians and drivers. These changes have increased vehicular and pedestrian traffic as well as distractions. The addition of traffic exiting from the hospital onto Kirchhoff Road and migrating through our neighborhood, which I believe it will only increase the volume of traffic and potential hazards. The entry-only trial off Kirchhoff Road has worked very well for the past 10 or 11 years to curb potential traffic issues for residents north of the hospital. However, there has never been a clearly defined basis established for this trial. I am here before you representing my neighborhood to ask that you consider modifying your motion to include a clear basis for the future trial for the 9 months, and to find quantifiable benchmarks or thresholds that would either support the decision to open the exit or justify it closing. I'm hopeful this trial will prove that our concerns are valid and justified. The village should establish a set of guidelines that measures objectively the impact of exiting traffic on this region of our community. Some points of measure should include a threshold for traffic increases on any one street not to exceed an established percentage for that street. So in other words, when we're doing this, let's establish the threshold of what percentage we're going to say is okay for an increase. Traffic changes on streets should not exceed that street's intended load. For example, Ridge is a collector street, and actual traffic volume should not exceed the established collector street load. We should track traffic warnings and written citations to measure traffic behavior during the trial as compared to before the trial. In addition, I want to share an interesting fact that may impact the partiality of the vote. It should be made clear that Bruce Crowther is a director at Wintrust Bank. Wintrust Bank owns Village Bank and Trust in Arlington Heights and the other branches. Trustee Carol Blackwood is Senior Vice President at Village Bank and Trust in Arlington Heights. Ultimately, Carol works under the direction of the board at Wintrust Bank. A true conflict of interest may not exist here, but this should have been made clear to the public during this process. And I also want to make a comment because I was a little discouraged with a reaction by Mr. Crowther. And I just want to let you know that, yes, this is a matter of integrity, and I am taking it up with my mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Nancy Link, and on deck.
In order to not be redundant, I'm going to just skip my turn and go to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Andrea McDonald, and on deck would be Carl Grunschel.
Hi, I'm Andrea McDonald, and I live at 625 South Kennecott. I am proud to reside in Arlington Heights, and I do support the hospital. I delivered our 4 children at Northwest Community Hospital. I go to the Bussey Center to see many of my doctors, and I am a member of the Wellness Center. That being said, the hospital has come to you for help in solving their internal traffic congestion and safety issues, and 6 of you have agreed to open the Kirchhoff exit. I stand before you asking for help in solving the traffic and safety issues that may result should you decide to open the exit. The hospital is looking to protect their business, and I am looking to protect my children. The Kirchhoff exit was closed for safety concerns. If you vote to open the exit, the safety of my children is threatened due to the fact that they spend a tremendous amount of time on the streets north of the hospital. For example, my children walk to their school, to Pioneer Pool, to Pioneer Park, They ride their bikes to check out books and movies at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. They bike to Olympic Park for soccer practice. They bike to our local downtown businesses such as Jimmy John's, Arlington Theater, and Yogurtland, a new favorite. And they run through these streets with their school, track, and cross-country teams. All of this activity occurs in the streets north of the hospital. If you decide, which I hope you do not, to open the exit, please help me and the other parents whose children do use these streets for their daily activities to accurately understand the impact of opening the Kirchhoff exit. Let us add a step to the current motion. Can you do due diligence and collect current traffic counts on each of the north-south roads from Dwyer to Highland and each of the east-west roads from Kirchhoff to Sigwalt? Then make this information available to all. This may include data counts for 7 days, possibly longer, and should be done for 24 hours a day, not just at shift changes, so as to capture the data of other unknowns, such as the Bussey Center, the Wellness Center, etc. Then I ask that you repeat this step and collect traffic counts a year later at the same time period and make this data available to all. At the end of the 12 to 15 months, we can all be educated on the increase in traffic and not just speculate using anecdotal data. Let us not miss this opportunity we still have to truly understand the current traffic on the roads affected by the potential opening of the exit. Please gather the data prior to opening the exit and then compare it to data collected a year later. Let us not rush ahead to open the exit and have no information for those of us who use these streets on a daily basis. Thank you for considering the safety of my children and the others in the community.
Thank you, Andrea. Carl? And followed by Janet Boyle.
My name is Carl Grunchel. I live at 809 South Ridge Avenue, and I've lived there for over 30 years. So I'm well aware of the situation with regards to the traffic on Ridge Avenue. Some of the things that have been spoken to, which I was going to address, is a little redundant, so I'll make some brief comments. First of all, I did want to address what Trustee Breyer said with regards to the outpatient clinic and the people that would be leaving there, and they would be anxious to get home, and that they should be able to exit there as quickly as possible. I would hope when they leave the outpatient operating area that they're in good enough health that they don't have to rush home to be in bed, which they're going to be for quite some time. So I don't quite understand that argument. Let me address.
I've been picked on. In private, I would tell you a story where time is of the essence. I won't.
You're messing up
do
his
it on
time here,
TV,
Trustee.
but I will tell you in private.
I've been in the outpatient several
how
times. I live
that's
right
not
across
true.
the street, but I don't want to be argumentative. I did want to address the one thing that was brought up by the hospital in their presentation on April 9th. One of the factors that the hospital brought up that President Carruthers mentioned was that with regards to the Bussey Center, their concern with the traffic was that they're losing their leasing opportunities, that people are leaving and because of the traffic situation. But then again, on April 30th, when he was asked the question about whether what the situation was with regards to their leasing on the Bussey Center, he said that they're full up and they're fully leased. So there's a little contradiction on what position he's taking. Either they're losing tenants for their Bussey Center because of the congestion, or they're full up and that's not an issue. So they can't have both sides of the argument. The same thing with the traffic. They want to say that the traffic isn't as much as they projected, but on the other hand, the traffic is so much that they have congestions there, and that's causing safety problems with regards to the access to the emergency vehicles. But that's already been addressed, and the fire departments, paramedics say that that is not an issue. I would take issue with the gentleman that works at the hospital, and he addressed you and said that that the people that are using that the employees of the hospital aren't using these streets, the interior streets of north of the hospital to transit the area. The data prior to the closing of the exits indicates quite differently that the people, the employees not from the area, are using Ridge Avenue as an alternative to the main streets of Arlington Heights and Wilkie to act as a cutoff, and the numbers on the traffic studies indicate that is the case, that it's a cut through and it's an easy exit. And as Tom Ponce said, the main idea as the hospital is developing its expansion was to divert the traffic onto the arterial streets, and that's what it should be. I thank you for your
Thank you, Carl. Janet, followed by John Beoff.
Good evening. When I was here on April 9th, I reminded all of you the history of the hospital. The hospital was built by Arlington Heights citizens for the village of Arlington Heights. And it appears to me that what's happening here is that the hospital has become too successful. We have two jewels in our village, the track and the hospital. They're what sets Arlington Heights apart from all the other northwest suburbs that surround us. I gave you some statistics the last time, and since I'll give them to you again, and I've got a few more for those who are into numbers. If you remember correctly, the hospital serves 27,000 Arlington Heights residents as outpatients in fiscal year 2011. Over 5,000 inpatients were Arlington Heights residents. 500, in excess of 500 of their employees are Arlington Heights residents. In addition to that, there are 5,000 members of the Wellness Center, and over half of them are Arlington Heights residents. There's 1,062 physicians on staff that's available to all of our residents. And then we talk about the hospital, and it's a not-for-profit, and it's a true not-for-profit. They're not owned by an insurance company. They're not owned by a conglomerate. They are a not-for-profit that's here to serve our community. In fiscal year 2011, the hospital gave away $93 million in community benefits. And they're a business. And as a not-for-profit, when they get profits, what does it go to? To re-improving the facilities. And what does that benefit? That benefits us. But they are a business. And you all listen to the radio, you all listen to the TV. Hospitals are now in competition with other hospitals. And if they don't provide the services that their customers want, the customers are going to go somewhere else. And ingress and egress and easy access is something that any customer to any business is looking for. And I think it's very important. Look at that picture that was up earlier. Would you want to sit in that, even if it wasn't after an outpatient procedure? I understand the controversy with the Ridge residents and the North, the Pioneer Park residents. I live on White Oak, okay, which is a through street that people are always cutting down. I cut down Mitchell, Trustee Sidor, every day. Okay, on my way to the train or on my way to...
And I've talked to Captain Pecora about it, too.
So, we do it. We all do it. It's going to happen. But, we've got to support the two jewels of our community, and I ask you to please allow the 9-month trial period. Let's see what happens, and then if it doesn't work out, we can try something else. But in the meantime, I think that the balance of hardships really does favor opening it for the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. John Beoff and Ken Kirk, following John.
My name is John Behoff, and my wife and I have owned the home at 918 South Walnut since May 7th, 1987. I just realized that's 25 years ago today. So, and I must say that for 25 years, the hospital has been a great neighbor. We've had many issues over the years with flooding and water and all sorts of things, and they've always been responsive. They've always been extremely good to us and over the years. So I can't really say anything negative about the hospital. I think opening the west exit is a good compromise. Over the past 11 years, I think it's pretty clear that Ridge and the residents on Ridge have gotten the majority of the benefit from the closed exits. And this preserves most of that. I'm all for helping the people on Ridge. They're the only street that has more traffic than Walnut. We don't want to hurt the people on Ridge. They bear a lot of the traffic. The other streets in the north may get more traffic from this, but their traffic's pretty light. Compared to Walnut and Ridge, it's pretty light. So if they get a little more, I mean, I don't see that as being a real issue. The triangle area would get some relief from this. Now, maybe not a lot of relief, but it's going to get some relief. I mean, if maybe 10%, 15%, it's better than nothing. We bear a lot of the traffic on Walnut. Now, let's get to the safety. You know, safety has always been the big issue on this. And, you know, that saying there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, I firmly believe that because, as Trustee Breyer mentioned and one of the staff mentioned, all the statistics we've been looking at over the years has shown that before the exits were closed and after the exits were closed, the amount of accidents was fairly consistent with the accidents moving from around the area of the exits to around the area of the triangle. That's what we've been looking at, these statistics, for years. Now, all of a sudden, these statistics have disappeared, and we have some new statistics. So I think you've got to be a little careful with these statistics. They seem to come and go and change. By the way, a 15-year-old boy was hit by a car at Walnut and Kirchhoff, and I think I emailed the board when that happened. Kirchhoff is a dangerous street, whether the exits are open or closed. I mean, this is an issue for another day, but this street is a problem because of the strange angles, and whether the exits are open or closed, that street's going to be dangerous. So I think opening this west exit is a long-awaited compromise. I think most in the triangle area would support it. I think it's a good idea. I think it preserves most of the benefits of the closed exits, but removes some of the negatives. That's what a compromise is. I think this is a good compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Ken? And on deck will be Betty Underwood.
Good evening. My name is Ken Kirk. I live at 1504 North Lincoln Court. I work in the Bussey Center. We're a private practice. We are tenants of the hospital. It's not just the issue here that we're talking about peak hours when the hospital employees are in shift control. A high percentage of our patients are elderly seniors. Many live directly north of the hospital in the neighborhoods we've been talking about. We've received numerous complaints over the years that they cannot exit directly into their neighborhood after coming to see us. They don't like the issue where they have to exit through the south onto Central and then cut over to either Dwyer or the Triangle in order to get to their home in the north neighborhood. I would expect this to be true of patients of the other practices and entities in the hospital as well, not just ours. It's been noted that the west entrance does not go directly across into the neighborhood itself. Unless you live directly north in the neighborhood, it doesn't seem to be an easy or logical route to take using numerous side streets if you're going to go beyond that neighborhood. It doesn't give you a real easy access when you leave from the west entrance. Additionally, there have been voiced concerns regarding the ability to Kirchhoff to handle the additional traffic. It would seem that Kirchhoff could handle the cars entering the hospital, then it should be able to handle the cars exiting as well. And I also could say the same thing about Ridge Road. Isn't it the same people who come down Ridge already that are going to be going up Ridge Road? It's not, I mean, they're coming down now and entering the hospital. They're coming off of Kirchhoff and entering the hospital. Lastly, I've expressed this before, Kirchhoff is a public road. The hospital, like any other resident that borders a public road, plain and simply, they should have access to the road. And that's all I'd like to say, other than I think we should be supporting the 9-month review of the west entrance and take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Betty Underwood, and on deck, Laura Bartell.
Hi, I'm Betty Underwood, 898 South Bristol, Arlington Heights. I have some very brief comments, but first I just wanted to address the danger of dealing with anecdotal stories versus facts, and that is we had one trustee open up with a public service announcement about how within that neighborhood people are already speeding and running stop signs, and it reminds me of when I was a PTA president, we had a police officer come to talk about how do we stop people from speeding and should we put someone there to control the traffic. And he said, if I do that, I'm going to be giving all of you guys tickets. And so that's one way to look at it. But then we have another trustee who says he's sitting in the parking lot of the wellness center watching people run stop signs, and that's deeply disturbing, and can we have a police officer maybe give tickets there? But then we don't have that same concern. Nobody's saying, I'm really deeply disturbed by the fact that people are running stop signs in that neighborhood. Maybe what we should do in response to that comment is have some more traffic patrol in that neighborhood. So do you see the little double standard that's going on here? And the hospital, in the minds of some people, is really being held to a double standard where we feel an urgency in one part of this neighborhood, but then we're holding the hospital to a different standard with this, just with this simple little stop sign issue that came up. And all I came to say is that you've listened, you've discussed various options, and you guys agreed to a plan, and it's a good plan. I think it is a compromise. I think it addresses the concerns and the safety of the people who use the campus, the NCH campus, and the people who live in the neighborhoods bordering the campus. And it calls for a 9-month evaluation. If there's any glaring problems with this plan, we're going to find out in 9 months, and then we can address it. But it will be fact-based, not I feel this or, this disturbs me. It'll be based on factual evidence of how traffic is flowing and how people are using these streets and whether it's dangerous or not. And I think that's what your consideration is. So I hope you guys vote to finalize the plan that you proposed last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Laura? And on deck will be Helen Jensen.
I'm Laura Bartell. I reside at 1007 West Noyes Street, Arlington Heights. I want to say thank you for letting me have this opportunity to just make a couple of points. I am a little concerned about some of the comments that have been made here. We mention a lot about Stonegate, Scarsdale, and Pioneer Park in particular in relation to this, but nobody seems to be talking about any of the ill effects that are taking place on Central Road going south through the south part of town. All residents pay taxes and deserve comparable representation. So why, then, has this issue continually gone on and on with only a one-side view being north of the hospital? We, south of the hospital, have Fernandez, and we have Heritage Park directly on Fernandez, and we have problems with traffic that are coming through. I have witnessed that on Central at certain hours when patrons are exiting. There's a lot of confusion on Central and a lot of racing through to try and get through the light, and they're cutting off people who are trying to make a right-hand turn, and there is a potential there as well for accidents. I really feel that this continued conversation and this continued jargoning over this topic for a minority group is causing dissension among residents. Our trustees are mandated to represent all taxpayers equally. It's mandatory all residential traffic concerns be addressed impartially. No neighborhood is better than another. So why are we willing to make special concessions for Ridge, a collector street, and Kirchhoff, an arterial, while other neighborhoods' traffic concerns are completely ignored, for example, on Fernandez? There have been 10 years of redundant studies wasting countless taxpayers' dollars, all resulting in the same conclusion: open the exits. There will be no added traffic or danger to Ridge or Kirchhoff. The majority of people using the street are residents. We pay taxes to use that street. The argument of safety for pedestrians and children is a valid concern throughout Arlington Heights, with some schools and parks located directly on arterials and collectors receiving no consideration at all. In this case, only one entrance to OLW is on Ridge, which has a crossing guard. Pioneer Park and South are nowhere near Ridge and make for a tenuous argument. If the board votes in favor of not opening the exits, you are setting a very dangerous precedent, forcing you to comply with all neighborhood traffic issues by limiting or stopping traffic volume immediately. There is the unanswered petition submitted by over 800 residents requesting the exits be opened, which were only supposed to be closed temporarily. We do not need any further studies. Let the hospital do business. The real challenge lies in why there is such a great resistant inability to make an unbiased decision based on the facts, all recommending opening the exits. The decision should not be based on the squeaky wheel getting the grease. I say this with all due respect, but I do have one major concern. I believe that there is one trustee who does have a definitive conflict of interest. And there has been some display of threatening behavior. And I believe that this individual should take a leadership position and recuse himself, especially in light of the fact that he has severely crossed the line of ethics, leaving a lack of confidence that he can address this issue fairly and unemotionally. And I commend Mr. Dixon for taking that step. Thank you.
Helen Jensen, and on deck is Ralph Ibbotson.
Now I know why I'm no longer sitting up there.
But we miss you.
Hi, Helen.
I'm Helen Jensen. I live at 616 Rolling Lane. And before that, I lived in Scarsdale for 40 years. So I've been around a long time. And I saw that this was coming up again, even though I was out of town in the first issue. And I thought, well, I think I'll come and say a few words. A mistake, obviously. But it's déjà vu all over again. I was here when this whole thing was passed all those years ago in 2000, what was it, 3? I don't know, 1? Okay, I was here. I was on that board. And I thought this closing at that time was dumb. And I still think it is. The hospital is our biggest employer. This has not changed issues. All it did, closing that, was to turn everybody, all the other streets into real problems. We had the problem with the only people that really suffered is the triangle. And then we came up with that wonderful decision, no left turns, on that off of Central in that area. And there was another great hoorah. I think it's time to open this. 30 years ago, I used to use Ridge as my wonderful shortcut from the north side to the south side as I'm spinning around in my village car, and because it was open all the way. You came down Ridge, you could go right through the hospital, one little curve, and you were out on Central. When they bought, the hospital went on its building charade, and they bought that land. That was the East Drive at that time. They bought the land, they bought the houses to the east. I lost my driveway. I lost my shortcut to the south side and had to find another place, usually Dwyer, which is just a little ways down the street. But there was no problem. Since that time, the hospital has expanded so greatly. The patient needs are so strong, and I think my friend had a very good point when he pointed out the problem with the patients receiving outpatient care and having a difficult time getting out of this place because, particularly if you are discharged at shift change time. Please, open the driveway. It was supposed to be temporary in 2001. It was just supposed to be a trial. Well, I think it's been a trial for everybody. It's time to open it, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, good to see you, Helen. Ralph? And on deck is Kurt, Anastopoulos.
My name is Ralph Ibbotson. I live at 610 Scottsville Lane, Arlington Heights. Let me say, first of all, that I'm not a neighbor of the hospital. I don't work for the hospital. I am an Arlington Heights resident, and I do use the hospital quite frequently. Now, obviously, most of the points have been covered over and over, and I won't belabor that, but I do want to make one observation. And I find it hard to comprehend how a major first-class hospital facility like Northwest Community Hospital can only basically have one major traffic exit, and that this exit doubles as the main traffic entrance. It doubles as the emergency room entrance for ambulances and people trying to go to the emergency room. It contains a crosswalk from the hospital to the health center, and this is all basically done on a 2-lane road that, albeit does open up to 4 lanes for about 50 or 100 feet at Central. Now, I realize there are 2 important sides to the argument, but I also think that the board has come up with a decision that gives these 2 sides an opportunity to actually study the issue in real life. The 9-month test period is the only fair way to proceed for all the parties, I believe. But the hospital also must make every effort to implement programs that will reduce the impact as much as possible on the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of things I think they can do to do that. Now, I know the board, the neighbors, and the hospital can talk to their blue in the face about this issue. And really, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but I don't really think that anybody fully understands the real-life results of of opening or not opening the north exit to Kirchhoff. So I think the best test for this real-life situation is to do the 9-month test for the exit and find out what's happening, what the results might be, and hopefully the results will be proper, so they will have no effect on the neighborhoods. And again, the hospital is a major part of the community, and having their customers, which are the patients or the Bussey Center people who use that, for their convenience and to just making their visit a less traumatic experience for them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Ralph. Kurt, and on deck is Frank Matzuzek, Rockwell.
Great. Hello, I'm Kurt Anagnostopoulos. I live at 631 South Ridge. And at the last meeting, I believe when this plan was brought up, the hospital and staff was asked if this was a situation that would work, and I believe their response was yes. Hours later, a reporter was talking to one of the attorneys of the hospital and asked about it, and that attorney said that this was a situation they could live with, but that they're going to continue to pursue opening Ridge Avenue. Moments right around that same time, and I think it was alluded to earlier, a resident came up to the president of the hospital, asked, why haven't you looked at other ways internally to solve this issue? And he thought for a moment and responded, I believe his exact words were, it's a matter of integrity. Take it up with your mayor. These aren't words that sound like they come from someone looking for a win-win, someone looking for a compromise. I think Trustee Scaletta at the last one of the meetings, you had said that you thought when you came in that this was nothing to do but convenience, and that after you thought about it and looked at it, you didn't see that anymore. I have to admit at the time I disagreed with you, but after having some time to think about this and look at it, you were dead on. This has nothing to do with convenience. If this had to do with convenience, I think over a 10-year period, changes internally from the hospital would be made. They don't care about convenience. We talked about safety, that this was an issue of safety. But again, 10 years, not one change. I don't think this is an issue of safety. Which leads you to money, right? It's always about money, but I don't think this is an issue of money either. These are intelligent people that run this hospital. You could take off-duty police officers and solve this issue, and I think you would do it, but that hasn't happened, so this can't be an issue of money. So what does that leave us with? You took something away from them. You took it away from them, and they didn't think that you had the right to take it away from them. And they're upset. I have to be honest, I'd be upset too. It's human nature. You take something from someone that they don't think you have a right to take, they're going to be mad. They're going to fight you. Integrity. The definition of integrity is to adhere to moral and ethical principles. I hope this isn't a matter of integrity. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Frank?
Pass.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Kyle Murphy. And after Kyle, we have Jeff Martin.
Kyle Murphy, 731 South Ridge. I just want to comment on what someone had said about the jewels of Arlington Heights. She left one out, and it's quality of life. I love my neighborhood. NCH had stated that it intends to submit its next 5-year plan in 2013. Unless the board is aware or familiar with its contents, it would be irresponsible to make a decision at this time. What does this plan include? Does it include more construction, higher projected car volumes? Contrary to what the hospital would like you to think, you are not kicking the can down the road. We want you to make an informed decision. I think we deserve that. Not only do we deserve it, the residents in this neighborhood and the children that are going to be going to these schools for the next 5, 10, 20 years, they deserve it. These decisions, the impacts will be felt that far ahead. Before you vote, I would like you to ask yourself, like former trustee Jensen said, it was a trial back in 2001. Has the closure from 2001 been a success? Now, I'm not talking about people complaining about it. I'm talking about it, was it a success? Did you achieve the desired effects? And yes, you did. You reduced traffic volumes on Kirchhoff and in the neighborhood, and you did. You reduced accidents on Kirchhoff. The concern over traffic being pushed into the neighborhood streets was dispelled by the HLR study. We know that is fact. NCH continues to succeed as an employer and in medical services it provides, and have not seen or read of any single failure of this closure other than a want by the hospital. Not a need, a want. Some of you passed on the motion last week to conduct the trial opening. Mayor, you said you'd like a win-win. I don't know what that is, and I don't know if it's possible. But to get neighborhood buy-in, you must look at this incrementally. You can't just leap. You can't skip that step and jump ahead to that trial period without exhausting that. It's rational, it's logical problem solving. Tabling this decision until the county can give you an answer on lengthening that signalization would be prudent. Quite frankly, I was surprised to see this on the agenda without having the answer to that question. In 2001, when this came about, you saw many faces from the neighborhood who were concerned about traffic and the volume. In 2006, it resurfaced, and you saw the same old ones and some more new ones. Now in 2012, there's a lot more. If you don't make the right decision here, this is not going to go away, and we're not going to go away. A vote to a quick motion and attempts to push something through when viable steps internally have been skipped is a failure. It's a failure of many of your political pledges to the residents of Arlington Heights, and it's a failure of responsible, logical, unbiased decision-making principles. Make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Jeff? And our final speaker, Lisa McNulty.
Jeffrey Martin, 805 South Salem Avenue, Arlington Heights, 2 doors in from Kirchhoff on Salem. Kyle did a wonderful job in his speak. I'll be brief. You know, this isn't just about number of vehicles, although that is a concern. It's also about the maneuvers coming out of this western exit if it's opened. Those of us that have been here before 1995 know what it was like then. It was difficult getting out of Salem on Fernandez. You had 6 different maneuvers of vehicles coming at you, east-west on Kirchhoff, in and out of the hospital, in and out of Salem. And what you're going to do if you reopen that exit is you're going to put back that sort of conflict. Mayor, you yourself talked about being scared trying to cross Kirchhoff with one car coming at you out of the hospital. Imagine those people who are post-op, nervous, sick, confused, can't understand a do not enter sign or a one-way sign now. Have them try to negotiate traffic with traffic cars coming 5 different ways against them or towards them. This board also approved the ball fields with these exits being closed. There's been talk about how come this hospital, this wonderful hospital, and nobody argues with we want the hospital to succeed, but that's not the focus here. Please don't lose focus. This is not about the hospital succeeding in its business or providing health care. It's about an exit. Little Company Mary Hospital is the closest comparable hospital because it's surrounded by residential areas, and they have 2 exits on 95th Street. All the other entrances going into the hospital are one-way in. The village can't see that from their aerials, but we went out there and we saw them. This closure was to be done on a trial basis, not for the heck of it. It was to be done to see if it would work. And Trustee Farwell, with his statistics, is right. It has decreased accidents on Kirchhoff. It hasn't moved them away or relocated them. It's actually decreased them. Kirchhoff is not that big of a street. Bruce Crowther, in his last presentation, said, "What's the best street to handle this traffic?" Ladies and gentlemen, it's not Kirchhoff. It's Central. Mr. Breyer, you're talking about people trying to get back north. You think there's going to be a waiting line at the western exit if you open that up? And then you got people trying to get into Kirchhoff with multi-directional traffic coming at them? Central is a much safer thoroughfare to do that on. Ladies and gentlemen, we look to you for wisdom. Please don't make this decision hastily. We've got facts to back it up. The statistics show it on accidents. There was a reason back in 1995 when this was closed why it was done. The board then was convinced it was a safety issue, and it still is going to be a safety issue if you reopen it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Lisa?
Hi, my name is Lisa McNulty. I reside at 2310 North Huron in Arlington Heights. I've been a resident of Arlington Heights for 25 years, and as a resident, I've used the services in the community, and one of the services has been the hospital. I use the hospital as a member of the Wellness Center. I use the hospital as a patient for my yearly mammogram and other tests and things like that, and yes, I'm also an employee. But first and foremost, I'm a resident of Arlington Heights. I live here, I work here, I pay taxes here, and I vote here. I drive down from the north side where I live, which is in the Greenbrier subdivision. I go out Kennicott, which is a container street just like Ridge is in my neighborhood. I come down south to Oakton, to Walnut, cross over Northwest Highway where it turns into Ridge, make a right onto Kirchhoff, and a left onto the west entrance of the hospital. I come down that way every day, whether I'm either working or whether I'm going to work out at the Wellness Center or if I'm going to the hospital for testing. I'm already going through the neighborhood. I go home the same way, except I can't exit north. I have to exit out onto Central. I make a right-hand turn onto Central, a right-hand turn onto Dwyer, a right-hand turn onto Kirchhoff, and then a left-hand turn onto Ridge, which takes me back up north to the Greenbrier subdivision. I know a lot of people are really concerned concerned about once we the exits are reopened, that there's going to be all of this increased traffic. But those of us that already live in Arlington Heights, that work at the hospital, work out at the wellness center, utilize the hospital, we're already there. And I'm asking you to reopen the exits because I am hoping that this traffic study is going to show that there's not going to be that much of a big increase in traffic because the traffic, which is me, is already there. I don't know how many of you trustees live north of the hospital. I don't know if you're allowed to answer that right now. How do you go home? When you go home from the hospital, how do you go home? If you do what I do, you're part of the traffic that's already there. Those of us that live in the neighborhood, that live north of the hospital, that live west of Central, that live east of Wilkie, none of us go up to Wilkie once we exit Central or go down to Arlington Heights Road. We all kind of make that little loop around and head up north on Ridge to go home. So I'm hoping that you're going to see in this traffic study that nothing's really going to increase. We're already there. So I hope you'll reconsider that and let the hospital open its exit and let it do its traffic study. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. That concludes, excuse me, those of you who have requested the opportunity to address the board on the subject. Some very profound things were said tonight by many of you. With different perspectives. But I think the theme that I kept hearing, and my colleagues might disagree with me, is that you want to base whatever we do on some kind of factual data. And that's really what we're trying to do. We went with the closure because we were concerned about what was happening. We see that it's moved, and there are residents who have expressed they moved to their area, or they now have difficulty expediting. Something that I think we can all admit is we all find shortcuts, no matter what we do in our routine. And shortcuts are probably more prevalent, as one speaker said, by people who live here, because they know where they can do the shortcut, and they do it repeatedly. The commuter probably is wanting to get out of town. We would like for them to stay and shop, but we don't want to make it through the neighborhoods. This is a real challenge. We weren't able to correct it, and I don't recall which one of you indicated you hoped that we could come up with something that would actually be the compromise. And I think it started with our engineer. That forget the win-win. Everybody's going to have to give. And we find the compromise that allows everyone the respect that they need. What that is maybe lies with the data. And all I think that in my mind is we might open it and we might close it again. You know, it depends on what we find out, but we need to know what's really happening, where it's coming, and those of you who are engineers, you know, we're going to look to you to come up with what we should be looking for. Not only our staff, I mean, a lot of our residents are quite bright, very successful. I think a lot of good comments were made tonight. Tom, were you taking notes? Okay. And passion is okay. I think everybody loves the community. We've heard it repeatedly. When you're ill, you really love having the hospital so close. I think that's why those before us said driving to Evanston or Elgin is just too far to get medical care. But looking at, I think, the alternatives of just doing the request was to open both. We were looking at something that wasn't going to just pour into a neighborhood. But whatever the staff evolves to do with the study, it better give us something that we can make a responsible decision that doesn't just move the problem. from one area to the other. And in a sense, there's some residents who feel that it was moved last time. So the studies have to be comprehensive enough to come up with the compromise. And we're not going to all get what we want. It's an angle road. It's perceived as a shortcut, Kirchhoff. It is a 2-lane road. Central's a 4-lane road. So I think we hope that we will continue to encourage and make it easy to get out on Central. But those who we've heard tonight, and we heard it the last time we discussed this, that our residents that live north are just taking the long way, but they're ending up going back and turning left on Ridge by going south, then back north, and then east to find where they want to go to their home. You can't erase all of those movements. It's a challenge. I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to look to those who can. Trustee Glasgow, I don't know if I can let you go before Trustee Farwell. Do you really want to do that?
No, I'll yield.
Okay.
But I'll go afterwards.
Mayor, and I've heard a lot of things tonight, and I echo a lot of the mayor's comments. The mayor appointed me as chairman of the zoning board of appeals prior to being on this board, and part of that is dealing with residential values and corporate values of real estate, as well as the needs and wants of people. These are public streets, but they're not, we don't have unlimited use of them. No matter whether or not you paid taxes or not, you can't drive 55 miles an hour down Arlington Heights Road, although some people try to. We have one-way streets, we have school zones. We can regulate these streets in any way that we feel is appropriate. Now, there's been a lot of disagreement here tonight, and there have been a lot of really inflammatory comments, which I was disappointed to hear personal attacks on my colleagues. These are really good people, and some of you don't have the privilege of working with them day in and day out. I do. And these people are good, honest, respectable people that don't deserve to be attacked. I don't care what side of the coin you're on. I don't always agree with them, but I trust each one of them. And I don't think any one of them would do anything unethical, nor would I think that any one of these people would do anything improper. Likewise, I've had the privilege of getting to know Mr. Crowther over the past 11 years that I've been part of the hospital foundation, and he is a good and honest man as well. He's working in a charitable organization, and this is a business, and this is one of the biggest employers in this village, and he deserves a little more respect than to be personally attacked. That being said, this is still a public safety issue to me, and if the police or fire chief came in here and told me that we needed this open today, I would be voting in the yes column to open it up. But I haven't heard that, and the empirical evidence, in my view, does not support what the hospital wants. I've taken 8 trips now to the hospital in various different times of the day. I've talked to 162 different members of the hospital. I've talked to I don't know how many hundreds of residents and answered every one of your emails. And I've talked to you personally and have met with you in your homes. This is not an easy decision to make because of the various factors that are made, but I think that this is important to determine whether or not this is a need versus a want. And in my column, this is a want. I don't see the need here when the county says that it's not a need. The police aren't saying that it's a need. The fire department's not saying it's a need. And I haven't heard from any ambulance service or emergency care unit saying that it's a need. All I've heard is that this is a want. So while I may not agree with my colleagues as to whichever way this vote may fall, I will not, and I don't expect you to personally attack them. It's improper. We're above all that. We're a good village full of good people, and you really should be privileged to know the people down this aisle are great people that have worked very, very hard for you.
Trustee Farwell?
Trustee Glasgow, I couldn't agree more about members of this board. I came on, was it 99, 2000? 2000, and I've learned a lot since then, part and due by the leadership of Mayor Mulder. She's taught me how and how important it is for consensus building, to listen to everybody's views objectively, come up with your own independently, but most of all, respect each other after the vote, because it's one vote and you've got another one next week and another one after that. We work in unison a lot as far as asking questions. I know there have been a number of times where my fellow board members have asked questions of the staff. We're very critical with the staff because we demand a lot of information. I wish people had a view looking down this table this way. Just a plethora of documents that we all went through. We're doing this because we care very much about our community, all of the community, not just the street we live on, as I have been accused of by Ms. Bartell. And I will not stand for a personal attack. I was and have been elected and reelected by all of Arlington Heights, and I represent all of Arlington Heights. When Nancy and I bought on Ridge, our oldest was literally just one, and we wanted a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath in the heart of Pioneer Park. It had sidewalks, sorry Scarsdale, but we just liked it. And we wanted to get as much house as we could afford, and we did, because I also took the old Irish approach of I move in vertically, I come out horizontally, and we want to make that our home, and we have. We understood that it was a collector street at the time, but it was the most we could afford. And we had decent backyards. I grew up on a collector street, Berkshire, across the street from a school, Horseman School. This is nothing new to me. I guess I'm a creature of habit as well. Buying on a collector street, living across the street from Wayside School. So with that being said, I think when you hear what we've been talking about and what I've been addressing very specifically this time round, and in 2006 a little bit, was the ramifications of streets that are not collector streets, streets that are side streets. Kennecott, Casper, when it curves around. I've got them here. Dwyer, all the streets west of Ridge, that when we open up the northwest corridor, they are going to be affected. How do I know this? Because I have proof from when that was open the last time. All you have to do is look at the crash data. It's not brain surgery. It basically shows that there were an average of 38 traffic accidents per year on Kirchhoff. It went down to 19.75. So, yeah, roughly half. It was cut in half. Now, Mr. Behoff had referenced the report from Chairman Toljanik at the time, saying that the traffic accidents kind of shifted, and he was concerned that the numbers that we have this evening and the numbers we got last week were different from the numbers that we got several years back. And I want to defend staff here. These are the exact numbers. The numbers that you gave us, that you worked on hard getting for this past week, are the exact numbers that are reflected here in the report. The report goes a little bit further, and it shows the traffic accidents on Central as well. And this is a different stretch. It goes from 99, but the traffic counts weren't complete in 99 for accidents, as we all know, but it only goes to 2006. And when we look at this, and we include Central as well, so I'm not just talking Kirchhoff, I'm also talking Central, the traffic accidents went down after the opening, after the closing of the Kirchhoff exits. So the numbers, the numbers are not lying. The numbers are just that. They're sheer numbers. And it does show that when Kirchhoff is open, there will be more accidents. I want to help the hospital because the hospital is an important part of the community. None of us have disagreed on that at all. the hospital has an issue, and that is traffic congestion on site, especially in certain given times of the day. This is not an old problem. This is not a new problem. This is an old problem. It frustrates me a little bit that they have not looked to, or if they have not brought forward what they have done to solve their own problem before coming to the board. But that being said, as a board member, I'd like to see if we can't help them with it. But not by going to the nth degree, not at the risk of twice the number of accidents. I want to take a sliding scale approach. First, what can we do to the Central Road exit to elongate the green, to elongate the time in those circle loops so that it's not just 3 seconds, but that it's longer so that we can get the traffic out there. I want to see if we can't fully explore that in the next year and a half. So when the hospital does come back in 2013, that we could take a look at this logically as one large piece and not just individual pieces of a mosaic and try to make it look like something halfway decent. That is what I was hoping that we would come up with on April 30th. Unfortunately, we came up with something drastically different that, because of the severity of the actions within that motion, I cannot endorse at all, because it will come at the hands of more accidents and more congestion, I believe, on Kennecott. But factually speaking, forget about what I believe, factually speaking, there will be more accidents. We have the proof. Now, this proof doesn't also include the fact that between the time we closed Kirchhoff and now, we also told the Park District to go ahead and open and expand Sunset Meadows. From, it was basically a driving range for those of us that need practice, and now it's football fields, soccer fields, a bocce ball field. So it's used a lot more, and at night too. So we've increased the amount of activity literally just a couple blocks away from the area where we're talking about. An area, a specific intersection, where admittedly the numbers suggest, both not only by the petitioner but ourselves, that 40% of the traffic derived into the hospital comes from that one particular area. Not without a more thoughtful approach, not without first trying to solve the real issue they came to us for, and that was internal congestion. There's no way I can support this, because by my voting for this, I know I will be partially responsible for the possibility of more accidents. I can't do it.
Trustee Breyer.
Charles or Tom, what do you think of the residents' suggestion about that center driveway out as opposed to what we're discussing?
Trustee Breyer, we talked about that a little bit today and modified the concept. It was one of the 25 options that we identified at the April 30th meeting. The two versions that we looked at allowed full access at that central drive and some restrictions either on Ridge or the west entrance. Allowing just exiting on that drive actually is a cleaner movement, because you don't have the westbound traffic coming into the entrance while people are trying to exit out. We would need to present this to IDOT. We did present it in conceptual form when we met with them about a week and a half ago, and they felt it had some merits at that time. Putting a pork chop or some restriction on the south side to try to restrict movement would be very difficult to do. Without, it'd be almost impossible to preclude traffic going north into Fernandez, and that's why we recommended the restriction to the north. So it does restrict some residential movements on Fernandez, but it certainly has, has some potential to cleanly and more efficiently move traffic out of the campus. It's more centrally located, so people coming to the hospital both on the east and the side and the west can exit. It's not a direct shot that you would have on the west. It eliminates some of the conflicting movements that you have with Salem and Kirchhoff, so it would be a cleaner exiting.
If we were to restrict you to one sentence, would you say professionally that's a better approach than the west driveway?
Well, I don't know that it's easy to say one's better than the other. They all have pluses and minuses, and I think if this is something that, we as a staff identified it because we felt it had merits. We didn't recommend it because it has some cost to it, and so we recommended the test period to understand where all the traffic's moving before making the hospital spend more money. That was why we didn't recommend it. It wasn't that we didn't think it was a good idea. Tom, do you have any other comments or any reservations after we talk about it today?
Yeah, just operationally, as Charles and I talked about it, I was just looking at it from the number of conflicting movements and pathways that would have to cross over one another. And really the Ridge Avenue access is the only one with the right turnout. You would just have to, if those people are continuing to go straight eastbound, have to conflict with the left turn crossing over that path. But for the westbound direction, that one's less of an issue with the Salem and West Driveway orientation currently.
So having said all that, is that a qualified endorsement?
I'm not going to say it's a qualified endorsement. It's just it's a way to manage the traffic.
Charles, you had the statistics from the hospitals, which I didn't bring before. How many beds at Little Company, Mary?
I'm sorry?
How many beds at Little Company? You had that chart. How many beds? And as long as you're looking, how many beds at Hinsdale?
I found it.
Just shy of 500, if I recall.
I found it.
Hinsdale had 274. We didn't have the Little Company on our list.
Does anyone know how many beds there are? I don't recall it being that large. Nothing like this one. 150? So that's a pretty bad comparison. That's a fifth the size of this hospital, right? Hinsdale's in a residential neighborhood, and that's why I brought it up. I remember they had a lot of driveways. But, the last time, I worked at Michael Reese at one time. A lot of people know that. They had 6,000 employees when I worked there, significantly larger than this institution. Never had traffic lined up like that. Except one time. It had nothing to do with the hospital. It was the Jimmy Carter gas lines. There was a gas station in the complex. As far as employees, never like that. And maybe it relates to something Edie Jolly once said, that we should have never closed off the street. The hospital should have had walkways across the street, and that way the streets could have been open through there, and we'd never be having this discussion today. I really like the alternatives suggested, and I hope at some point we pursue that. I will also commit that while I believe this is the right solution, at least to explore, I would have the courage, if the statistics come in different, to say it should be closed again. But if they come in that there is not a problem, I'd have the courage to say they should stay open. So I'd like to see us progress tonight and do the tests. I'd like to see us have the preliminary statistics first to measure the neighborhood, so we have a baseline to compare to. And at this time, I'd like to make a motion. We already have a motion on it.
We have the motion and second, same as before.
I'd like to see us proceed then to a vote, unless
I
there's,
think you seconded it.
yeah, I guess I did. Well, that was 4 hours ago, practically, 3 hours ago. Short attention span, we need to put.
I know, you just came out of emergency room and you're trying to get home. Okay.
Is it okay if the rest of us get a chance to say something?
Absolutely.
All right.
Trustee Scaletta.
Just a couple things. The first one is on the crash data. I see partially what Trustee Farwell is talking about, but some of it just seems a little bit skewed. When we talk about the Kirchhoff-New Wilkie intersection, there's also a note that it's a multi-jurisdictional intersection with Rolling Meadows.
Correct.
Okay. And so we don't know what actions occurred there that they reported on.
Correct.
Or that they responded to, I should say.
This is only the reports that the Village of Arlington Heights took.
Okay. So with cell phones now, when someone dials 911, it goes to dispatch, to the Northwest Central Dispatch, and then they determine who to send out?
Yes. You have to get to a Andy, you have to get to a microphone.
Get a mic. We'll let you be the manager for a moment.
If there's an accident that occurs at that intersection and it's reported as a injury accident, both Rolling Meadows and Arlington Heights will respond there until the determination can be made whose jurisdiction it is. So there's no delay in providing service and first aid care to people.
Okay. And so basically at that time, the two jurisdictions look at it and go, it looks like it's on your side, it looks like it's on our side?
It's basically that simple.
Okay. All right. Just following along. And so that's a little bit of the data that might be missing because that intersection is a little bit odd. When we talk about earlier when you brought up that Trustee Farwell brought up about Sunset Meadows, the one thing I did notice was that it opened in 2010 and it looks like we're on the decrease, which is a good thing. And maybe the park is making people focus a little bit that there are children around and maybe they are slowing down over there. So I see it as kind of a good thing. The other information that we're not being provided is what the crash data is on Central. I mean, we could have these meetings every week and keep asking you for more information, but just one of the things I noticed was that we talk all about what happened on Kirchhoff, but we really don't know what happened, elsewhere where all the traffic is flowing. I agree with some of the comments tonight that we really should have quantifiable benchmarks, which I think staff is working on and will continue to work on, so that we start this process and going in the right direction, and that down the line, 9 months or so, be it at the end of this study, that we do have quantifiable benchmarks that we can use.
Central crash.
Thank you. Many of residents have mentioned about the Ridge Avenue entrance also becoming an exit. From the minute that we started talking about this, I've been very clear. Ridge Avenue, in my mind, will never be an exit. It is not set up to be an exit. It is just way too fast-paced at that intersection for anybody to be leaving the hospital. The pad, I'll call it, for that entryway is very narrow, or I shouldn't say narrow. It's not very deep. So there's really no way for stacking, and all I think it does is encourage people to make their maneuver at a fast pace because they need to kind of get moving. And I do believe that a lot of the residents that also work at the hospital or go to the wellness center are traveling on these streets already. They're just finding a different way to get there. So the people in the triangle and obviously Dwyer are taking most of the hits until they get to the north side of the hospital, and then they find their path. I would ask that if we could, if this board and the petition, or the motion maker and the person that seconded it, that would be you, Trustee Breyer. If we would consider having a number 5 on the internal hospital access traffic circulation, which would say something to the effect of reevaluate the southwest exit striping at Central, as staff has been out there today just measuring, and granted it was just a preliminary measurement,
I'm just wondering if that's something that we could fit into our motion. And I would imagine that, I don't want to speak for the hospital, but I would imagine that they would be supportive of that, considering that all we're going to do is help ease congestion on their property. I think that's all I have to say for now.
And less costly, so.
Yes.
I've gotten 2 notes, big and little, but they both say the same thing. Little Company of Mary has 494 beds. So, I'm not sure where this one came from. I think this one came from Jeff.
I got the little note.
Okay. They've been emailing each other. Okay, no.
No, that's a violation. Oh, my God, what are you doing?
No, they haven't.
Okay. Anything else, Trustee Scaletta?
I have no further questions at this time.
Trustee Hayes?
I would be in favor of the suggestion of Trustee Scaletta to add a number 5 to the internal hospital access / traffic circulation conditions, specifically that the hospital will work with the village to evaluate the feasibility of restriping the exit lanes heading south onto Central. And so I would make that addition to my motion.
And the
agree?
seconder will accept.
Okay, motion and second have just amended the motion. So please, everyone, note that there's a little twist to that. Trustee Blackwood?
Should we make the motion before 11 o'clock, or should we wait?
I say we
I don't
vote
think
on
we'll
it
be
before
finished.
11 o'clock.
You want to make the motion?
I would
Okay.
make a motion to extend the meeting no later than 11:30.
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Rosenberg, that we continue the meeting past 11. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Probably just broke, we had a motion on the floor, and we just took another one. But I think for those of you who are not used to it, we cannot continue a meeting past 11 o'clock unless we have a concurrence of the majority of the board. Okay, Trustee Blackwood, and then we'll go down to Trustee Sidor and back to Trustee Farwell.
Thank you. For purposes of clarity, Robin, since I have been targeted as potentially having a conflict with Mr. Crowther, could you, for the record, let Ms. Schultz and anyone else who has any questions share the conversation that you had with me regarding this and what your recommendation was at that time?
Well, I had received an email last week mentioning the potential conflict. I spoke with Village Attorney Jack Siegel, and after consulting with him, we determined that there was no conflict and there was no appearance of propriety, and I relayed that information to Trustee Blackwood.
And for that reason, I continue on with the board in this regard. But this isn't about me, this is really about the hospital. And one of the things that I was very interested in this evening, and it was Mr. Zahorsky's suggestion of option 6. And Charles, I know that you had a number of options that, 25 you mentioned earlier, but option 6, just for my information, was that ever shared with the hospital as being maybe option 3, which is what we were looking at, was the very best option you thought, or one of the better ones? Did you share option 6 as well?
Trustee Blackwood, all the 25 options were given to the hospital along with the
25.
memorandum that went out to the board on April 30th. Also, option 6, as we had presented it, was presented at the April 30th meeting, so they were aware of that. The resident the residents that contacted me today, they made a suggested modification that center driveway be exiting only, whereas we had evaluated it for full movements.
Okay. That's really what I wanted to know. And I also want to reiterate that I stand with the changes to the original motion that was made at the Committee of the Whole tonight, and I will be voting in favor of this.
Trustee Sidor?
Thank you, Mayor Mulder. In light of all the discussion this evening and the process that's been discussed both by Mr. Ponset and Charles and put forth, I'm comfortable with the trial period and the motion with the items that are listed in the motion. This is my neighborhood. I can hit if on a good day, maybe a 7-iron over to, Joe's house, Trustee Farwell's house. It's both of our neighborhoods. And I think, echoing what the mayor said, is that the only way to really figure this out, put this thing to rest once and for all, so that these residents in our neighborhood aren't constantly wondering what's going to happen next or what the hospital's going to do next, is to get some solid data during this trial basis. Are there risks involved? There's always risks involved when you open, close, change, put up a stop sign, put up a yield sign, and whenever you put up anything that changes the flow of traffic. But I still believe that it'll make this hospital, if it's successful, a more user-friendly hospital. And I did speak to Trustee Glasgow's point regarding the police's input on this. I did speak with one of the captains on our police force today, and apparently we have some sophisticated measures that can measure quantity of traffic as well as speed going up a particular street. That is rather stealth-like from what I understand. And he reassured me that there are ways to make sure that these thresholds that will be determined, whether they're exceeded, they will be reported to us, or whether they are under that threshold, can be reported to us. And if Mr. Murphy and Polly and others will have me on their driveway to drink coffee and watch traffic go by, if for a eyewitness report on that, I'd be happy to do so during the trial period. But with that said, I would be in favor of the motion as it stands.
Would you do it if they didn't give you any coffee?
I'll bring the coffee. And donuts if they insist.
Trustee Farwell.
Well, it appears that the motion, just like it was last week, will be passing. With the opening of the northwest exit now for a temporary period. Notice that's not trial; it's temporary. There's a difference between those two words.
Ellen, where are you going?
I would ask that the staff and the police department pay particular attention to Salem, Fernandez, Kennecott, and of course Dwyer, for speeding through that area. Because those areas, not so much, Dwyer is a little bit different, but certainly Salem, Fernandez, Kennecott, were not designed. These are side streets. So I'd really ask that we do something within the police force to try to assure that that isn't going to happen. Do some sort of softening devices. We have those boxes that flash red or whatever when you're going over the speed limit, or just pay particular attention to that particular area, because I think that's the area that will be most vulnerable during this time, obviously. And that's the area that, although I'm concerned with all of Pioneer Park, that's the area that I'm most concerned with, because it just simply wasn't designed to handle what they might, and based on statistics, have in the past dealt with. And I think Polly brought out great comments earlier on in the evening that set off the evening, that when we do set up the idea for measuring the traffic, that they be concrete, and that we understand exactly an objective, and that we have percentage ratios and thresholds that each street will bear, given its current measurement, in light of what they will end up having at the end of result during this 9-month study. So in other words, when we're looking at the baselines, because the baseline is going to be based on the direction of staff, to take the baselines on Salem and Fernandez and just make sure that does occur, so that when we look at the new traffic, or the new number, we want to see exactly where it's going, and it's not going too much on to one street that it's not intended to go on, or the street is not designed to handle. So those are very important issues, and it's not so much with Ridge. It's not so much the increased traffic; it's the increased traffic in a safe manner. That is the issue with Ridge. That if you're going to increase the traffic, make it so that it occurs, but it occurs in a safe manner, so that as the traffic goes through Wayside and a block off of Pioneer and a block off of South, that it doesn't create unreasonable risks. Because if you look at the afternoon rush is also the public and private schools' rush hours as well. They run concurrently. So I'm very concerned about that. So that's all I have for you.
2 weeks.
Pardon?
The 2 weeks of police.
We can't, that would only going to be for Central.
Excuse me, we can't have little
Okay.
conversations
All
here.
right. That's fine.
Gotta stay in the mic so everybody can hear you. It's an open meeting. Any other comments down here? Trustee Rosenberg has been very quiet tonight.
Very quiet. Let my other colleagues talk. Charles, in light of some of the comments that Tom made earlier about that the county is not interested or feels that there probably won't be any merit in looking much at Central Road, is that something that we should take upon ourselves to look at and give them the numbers if we determine that, they're favorable to the extent of trying to change the lights to, the green one way or the other?
Well, we had talked this afternoon about trying to get the county representatives to come out and meet with us and observe. What they've been doing is just collecting data from their own, equipment, so that they could come out and actually meet us and actually see what's happening out there. And then with the potential to make some changes in the configuration on that west leg, maybe a combination of those two things, they might then reconsider. So we plan to continue to have that dialogue with them.
The thought is maybe if we had some hard data, that would be good to give them at the same time that they come out also, if that's possible.
We'll certainly provide any data that we have that, would, present the case for more green time to help alleviate traffic, because then that would keep more traffic on Central even during this test period.
Correct. Those photos that were provided by the hospital before, did we have an exact time of when those were taken?
I don't know whether there's a time on the...
Approximately 4:30. 4:30. So that would be more after the shift then? Okay. That's interesting. Could I ask a question of the hospital representative? Would you mind coming up for a second? You just need to identify yourself, if you would, again.
Bob Klasik, I'm Vice President of Facilities at the hospital.
So those photos that were taken that are shown on the screen now, is that something that occurs for a solid, 1 to 2 hour period every day, or is that just an isolated short time frame?
To be honest, we haven't studied it, so we don't know durations, and it would appear to have variables, obviously. So I couldn't tell you what day this was, and we have peak days, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays tend to be a little heavier. Again, this is not just all employee. Well, and yeah. So
first day of the sale. No.
So we couldn't tell you. Actually, in the last few weeks, we've had our security officers monitoring this. So we're just starting to take but it's rudimentary data. Sometimes this can last 20, 25 minutes. Sometimes it'll last 40 minutes. And we see we see this starting at the 3:30 and also at the 4:30. So from 3:30, the peak time would be 3:30 to 5 to cover the stretch. But it's not solid. We see some openings in that period of time.
So is it your intention also to do internal monitoring also to find out exactly days and times when these things occur to maybe assist with the county side of trying to get the light regulated?
Yeah, we know that it's specifically, yes, and to understand the duration, the number of cars by day, and look at that. It really needs a number of days to be significant data, and so it's not just episodic.
hold on for 1 second. So Tom, back to you for a second. So when the light, it's activated by the number of cars that roll over that measurement device as far as that goes. So do lights have certain times where they're just on certain days and times where they are actuated differently? Is there such a thing?
Full traffic actualization means that there are certain minimum and maximum times that a light will stay green. When you have somebody sitting on a loop to call up a green light, it'll stay green for a minimum amount of time. If nobody else hits the loop, it'll cut off. If people keep on going to it, it'll stay for a maximum amount of time. I don't believe these signals would have, I'll say something, they may have a Saturday operation where that minimum time and maximum time may be altered because there's no traffic theoretically coming out of the hospital or as much, so they'd give more time to the cross streets. So there might be day of the week time patterns and weekend time patterns that they would have programmed into their traffic signal controller.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't know that for sure at this point.
Okay, so that's something that then the hospital will take on as far as part of their role in evaluating the traffic on the central southwest.
Could you clarify that? Take on that.
I mean, as far as the
not
data
the,
counts
not the
and
signal
things,
timing.
Yes, well, and the traffic counts.
The traffic counts and duration of traffic, and then working with a village engineer.
Yes.
With regard to the queuing of the green lights. Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Charles, as far as the issue was brought up about traffic south of the hospital, south of Central, is that something that will be part of this or not at all factored in there as far as are we going to do any kind of measurement in that area, or has that been an issue?
Well, I think with the HLR study that was looked at, and some of the counts, the base counts will pick that up, especially on the triangle streets, but the plan was not to, analyze all the cut through from the south. The plan was to get baseline data of the streets that either have, traffic winding their way back to the north or the streets to the north. So we have a baseline data. Then during the test period, we'll evaluate it with police and additional counts, so we'll know which streets went up and down. But that's a whole different study to try to evaluate the cut through from the south.
So we don't feel that there'll be any change then to the traffic to the south as a result of any of this?
Well, I think, you might see some potentially the volume might go down a little bit on Walnut. It may go up a little bit on another street, and some of that traffic on Walnut right now is cut through from the south.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily all hospital traffic.
So does it make sense, though, to derive some kind of baseline for the street south in case there is an adverse effect subsequent to that?
Well, we don't think that's necessary with opening, one exit on the north.
Okay.
It's going to be more getting baseline data, and there's a lot of intersections and streets to do as it is, to get the baseline data so we can see when you open that west exit during the trial period, where is the traffic going? It's going to be going north, so we don't need to evaluate the south just to open up the north.
We can use the new Arlington Heights drone to measure the traffic. So, that's all I have. Thanks.
Other comments from anybody? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor with an amendment, and the amendment was also concurred with.
Yes, by the second.
So, is there any other final comments? Voice vote. Roll call.
I'd recommend a roll call.
Roll call.
Trustee Hayes?
Yes.
Trustee Breyer?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
Trustee Farwell?
No.
Trustee Glasgow?
No.
Trustee Rosenberg?
No.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
President Mulder?
Yes. The data is very important. I'm going to look at the hospital people as well as the staff. things don't happen real quickly. As a decade went through, though, I think it was pretty quickly. Concern is how our roads are going to be used. You're reading the 53, how many people use Central to get to 53 and then go a few blocks and get off. If they toll it, it's going to keep a lot more people on our local roads. And so we need to really look at this because we don't want to make things worse. You know, and that's why trial basis is very trial. I mean, safety. And I think our police department, Andy, you know, I don't know, we don't have that many staff, but we really have to observe what's happening because it's important. And we have to understand, engineers need to understand what people are going to do and then design it to make certain everything's safe. Because that's the common denominator I heard in everyone's comment, regardless of where they live, is they like the community because it's safe, thanks to our public service people. Thank you. But, you know, we can't just think today. We have to try to think about what's potentially down there. And that's why we have to keep reorganizing. So the motion does pass. Now we go back to the last 5 pages in our agenda, which is all blank. Because we've taken care of it. Anything else from staff? Nothing further.
To adjourn.
Second.
Motion for adjournment by trustee Glasgow, seconded by trustee Scaletta. If there's nothing else, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience, your interest, and entering the trial. This meeting is now adjourned.